across the entire state, and
that's
people were cheering.
Really great gizmo there.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. See how you see the rats we catch.
And my instant thought was, I guess I literally said out loud, I ate the bunnies. So it's one of those things that this is gonna be recorded, so it'll come out eventually. But it was like the most hilarious but devastating thing at the same time.
Well, that's gonna be the opening, Colin.
Oh, so, fair enough.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, I just hit the record button, and
funny.
Stephen, nice to meet you, Stephen, for the first time face to face, at least. And,
great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Well. And Heather, nice seeing you for the first time. And Tommy, so cool. Colin, I'm actually, I had a different idea for how to start, but I want to ask if anybody has ever seen this before. I just found this website today, and I'm guessing some of you have probably seen it. It's called Craft Your Fandom, RPF.
Oh, the real prop forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured Stephen would know at least.
I used it because my wife does, she makes our costumes, or Halloween costumes and various other things, and she's made me an authentic Obi-Wan Kenobi from episode 4 and Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Disney Plus series. And so, you go online trying to find, reference that. They do a great job. There's a lot of fans out there that are really passionate about like being authentic in matching the actual fabrics and the various other things like that. So great group.
Actually, Stephen, that does make me think, because this has come back to like 20 plus years ago for me. But is your wife on the replica prop forum? Because I know that's a huge staple. Even Hollywood has gone to for the Star Wars related stuff, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because one of my friends, he was like learning to build lightsabers. When Revenge of the Sith was out. And the attention to detail, trying to get screenshots of like some that's been obscured by a hand in every single shot. It's pretty remarkable.
What they've been able to figure out. And, and you look at things like, again, authenticity. And they and I think of like the 501st that, want to, they have like a book and guidelines about what you want to create. She was trying to make me a Krennic costume from Rogue One, and couldn't get the jacket to work right. But like looking at like what the qualifications were for that, and I think when you look at like things like that, and then you think about like what the designers did for like the show, right, for Twin Peaks, or the costume designers, and like trying to get that authenticity around stuff, pretty amazing. And even the fact that like when we were researching a lot of the props, how they are all that kind of period piece, especially from season 1 and 2 of that kind of 1950s, 1960s, mid-century type vibe, from the Pendleton shirts that the many of the cast wear to just a lot of the different, set decorating that exists. They really did go through and capture it from that time.
It's a great show.
Wow, it's Josh joining us.
Hey, friend, sorry, don't let me interrupt. Keep doing your thing, Colin.
Oh, no. Actually, I finished up saying what I was going to say, Stephen, because I know if we talk about Star Wars and replica prop form, that could be like a whole 20 minutes. So
the conversation was on the highs and lows of Mama's Family and how we feel about the story arc in season 3. Let's go.
That's it. I think Josh is an expert on that topic.
Awesome.
Yeah, I never saw that website before, so I thought it was pretty cool. I assumed Stephen was familiar with it. I thought Heather would be interested. I don't know if you've seen that before, but I know as an artist, you'd probably find that pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you seen that before, Heather?
No, I haven't, but I definitely want to look at it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And the extent to that one person went to recreate like the white horse
Right.
from part 18 of the return. That was pretty
Yeah,
cool because
that was really
I don't
cool.
know if it was he or she, but they said they really tracked down to the best that they could the authentic details of that recreation. And my initial plan for today was to ask people to really talk about any kind of like gadget or symbol or object or item. And I know they're kind of synonyms, but not necessarily. I wanted to open it up so that it's not like just gadgety stuff. Um, and for people to come with really anything they wanted to talk about. I'm kind of thinking this might end up being sort of like an art appreciation session because as I started thinking through the series, it just stumbling and thinking about like item after item after item after item, all these custom made, sometimes bizarre, often very cool, almost always unique and memorable, items. It was sort of like an art celebration in my head. And I'm sure the conversation will go in multiple directions, some of them perhaps insightful into the storyline as well. But and hi, David, thanks for coming. So I'll open that up to whomever.
Actually, I guess the first one, because when I heard about this topic, the one that was like I was thinking about for a better part of like probably the first 2 hours was if I can be broadly with symbols, is the owl cave symbol itself, because the way it's used in the narrative, like for example, we see it as in one particular way, but when it's presented upside down, that's another facet. Like for example, in season two, they find they go to the owl cave where they find the lever, but Wyndham Earl presents it upside down. And then also the arm, when he presents the ring to Laura, the symbol is also upside down again. So I think that there's something to be said about, maybe talking backwards in the Red Room and the Black Lodge. Also, if you put like a line right down the middle of it, it is perfectly symmetrical. And I think of how reflections are very important in Twin Peaks. So those were the two things I was thinking of in particular for why the ring is so important narratively and how it fits in with like Lynch's filmography and how at least I interpret Twin Peaks at large.
Yeah, and pardon me for jumping in when I'm sure other people have have things to piggyback on. But I'm glad you said the word narratively because in my eighth grade classroom where I teach, when we talk about symbolism, we always talk about starting with the narrative itself first. So first, like kind of like what is the literal role that this thing plays? What, how does it function within the story? You got to kind of get that out of the way first before you can, at least in my class, before we could say, all right, what does this remind us of? This is literally what it's doing, but it also might be signifying something else. So as far as that symbol, or perhaps the ring, if anybody wants to go there, I know everybody's thought about it, at least casually. Anybody have any thoughts on what Colin has raised? Because I don't.
I'm gonna extract your thoughts out of you at some point. We've seen you interview everyone and talk to them about their thoughts and philosophies, right? But where do you stand there,
Um,
Anthony? Where do you think about the ring?
Well, I was hoping to talk about the white horse to start, but as far as
Okay.
but
All right.
as far as this as far as this no as far as the symbol on the ring goes, I think it's extremely cool the way I think the first time we see it is actually in the cave. So it's a little weird that that thing that's in the cave also ends up showing up in many other locations throughout the show, including on the ring that apparently has been halfway around the world and back. The ring that has apparently been in these other dimensions. But the first time we see it, I think, is in the cave, when all the dust is falling from the ceiling. Why is this one symbol scattered about in all these different locations, domains, objects? I don't know. But
I guess I wonder whether or not you hide your philosophy of the show and you protect it so deeply because really you think that the dreamer is the llama. You know what I mean? And you're afraid that the rest of us are going to shun you for having said it, right? It's
my
okay,
my
man.
own my philosophy is honestly to get people around me who have things that I find interesting or who have personalities that I find interesting and hear what they I have never done the work. So I've been watching the show since 2020-ish. And I have never done the work of sitting down and like trying to sketch something out, or trying to organize my thoughts, trying to draw little maps and arrows to connect things together. I've never done any sort of disciplined thinking, quite honestly. So I have taken a discipline-free approach, and the only discipline I've used is in trying to get some conversations together, organizing my questions I have like 700 questions written down, usually coming to me when I'm listening to a podcast or watching or reading something like maybe Stephen's article today. I wrote down 2 more questions. But as far as like trying to formulate something coherent that pulls together many different threads, I haven't done the work to do that. I don't know if I have the skill set to do that. When I started like doing this interview thing, it was literally to try to find out how other people do it. Just as a teacher, but also as like a fan of the show and just a curious person. So I don't know. I know Josh has done it. He's put the work in to try to formulate his thoughts in a coherent manner. You could talk about how, if you want. You could talk about an object of your choice, a symbol, etc. Totally up to you.
Yeah, I could probably do both. I wrote a few down of my favorites. And ultimately it's all therapy. Like the idea of art being one of these places where we can transcend, the common narratives of our lives. It's important that we have an avenue to be able to project our empathy into other characters in fictional situations. I was just sitting down with someone. They're like, "Why do you watch so much TV?" And I said, "It's an exercise in empathy and sympathy. I'm not a naturally empathetic person, so I'm able to work that stuff out through art." And honestly, I've written over 1 million words about Twin Peaks: The Return since it aired in 2017, and every one of them is ultimately about my reaction to the art. So for me, it's a very personal situation. And even when you do symbolic readings, most of the symbols that we see on the screen really, I mean, like everyone's opinion is equal, but when you put your own kind of reflection into it, that's when it becomes really unique. It's also the fuel for the passion of keeping writing about something. I mean, let's be honest, there's maybe 100 people in the world that could sit down and speak for hours and hours about Twin Peaks, and we're probably 6 of them here. So like this, it's a great thing when we gather these tribes together and actually exchange. My favorite symbol in all of Twin Peaks is the golden shovel. And I actually don't consider it a symbol. I consider it a piece of technology. So, I've come to see that ringing when Jacoby slams the golden shovel. I believe that reverberates throughout the return. And anytime we hear the hum in the Great Northern and any of these places where that hum grows and grows, I believe that is the echo of that original ringing. And there is an element of justice in that. There's an element of self-discovery in that. There's an element of calling home to that. In fact, as you get closer to that door in part 17, the hum grows louder and louder and louder. So I love this idea that symbol, carries this dig yourself out of the shit empowerment. I use it as my symbol on social media. I mean, I created my own icons when I wrote my book. So to me, that's like the penultimate Twin Peaks symbol for me. That's the one I think about when I would put it on a t-shirt and wear it with pride. So there's that.
Now, aside from the shovel being made of metal, why do you think that's the thing that reverberates throughout the show?
Great question. I don't know the full answer to that. I could tell you my interpretation of that. So there was a book that just recently came out by Dr. Tony Nader called Consciousness is All There Is. So Tony Nader took over from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi after he passed away. So he is now kind of the global spokesperson for TM. The interesting thing about this book is it essentially argues that all existence is unmanifest consciousness, and that when we do manifest, it's through time and space, and we operate at such a typically lower level of consciousness that we're unaware that there is a universal unity to everything. So that unity is the calling home. It's kind of the ultimate awakening. And if we could read Twin Peaks: The Return especially as this progress of awakening from being completely asleep and lost in a dream to
achieving some type of, supreme consciousness, that golden shovel would be the symbol for that. The idea it's gold, the golden ball. I see it as an empowering icon, a good icon. There's nothing, I think, evil or negative associated with it. And to me, it's like the best thing about Twin Peaks. Not to mention, the shovel is carried, to free free Norma and Big Ed. Like that is the symbol that unites them in the return as well. That's literally what she's carrying when she's walking down the road to free him from his bondage. So I just see it as a really powerful symbol, and it's one of my favorites.
You know what's interesting, man? I don't know if I've ever put as much stock into the concept of the shovel as a utility to reach a form of completionism. I do know that, currently I'm on a journey and exploration to try to reconcile Carl Jung's understanding of individuation through the lens of why Mark Frost would incorporate that into the lore. And particularly what I'm on about is trying to figure out, if what he's done is forwarded the concept that we are actually seeing a physical representation of the personal unconscious as manifest by the collective unconscious, and how the myth that David Lynch is using inside of the show is the myth that the dreamer has chosen to be the rectification of self. That sort of lays over like exactly what you're saying, because one of the interesting things about that is that it doesn't, I mean, it does definitely matter what myth that you assume you're seeing. Myth about theosophy or myth about, it does matter because those philosophies are baked into it. But the idea, that what Jung's on about it all is discovering why it is that cultures with no ability to have ever spoken to one another or even recognize that each other exists could create the same hero mythology, where that comes from and how it's possible. And of course, to his understanding, that's because of the collective unconscious, right? But then what would that look like of your own personal unconscious, a dreamer's personal unconscious, and then ultimately whom I believe is the dreamer's personal unconscious and the person that I've chosen for that. But it's super interesting. Like I picked the mandala for that, right? The circle, not a specific circle, not just the ring, although that would be the clear contender of the most important, but just the circle itself, the repetitious nature of the circle reoccurring in the show so much, whether it be a donut, a clock, a ring, doesn't really matter. The usage of that as a mandala, right? The exercise that Jung would put his clients through to reach the self through the process of individuation, through the expressions of symbols and understanding yourself better. You've almost forwarded the idea that it's the shovel. And in a lot of ways, man, there's a lot of parallels between what's happening with what you're saying with Jung's use of the mandala. And I think that that's really interesting. There's a lot there to explore, man. There's a lot there to explore about this symbol of the shovel based on what you just said.
Well, I've always thought it was really interesting how he accentuates the idea of the two coats of gold paint on the shovel and there's the two layers of consciousness and how you're trying to reach the second layer of consciousness. And I think the shovel is how you get there.
You mean from the personal unconscious to the actual conscious itself?
That was the tool.
We're sorry, guys.
I'm not good at explaining.
Good stuff. No,
that's actually a great point. I was listening to Tommy and Heather have a podcast called Dreamer's Diary, and it's brand new. And there was a new episode today. And at some point, you were talking about transcending from one stage of consciousness to the next, and that is in some way connecting to what Josh was saying. And all that stuff is very sort of fuzzy for me, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But it made a lot of the concepts, especially from the return, very tangible in a way that is graspable and makes sense. And that doesn't mean that's what's happening in the return, but like when Cooper and Diane like cross over, and when people talk about different worlds or being between worlds and whatnot, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around unless it's in animated form. You know, if it was like
Yeah.
a cartoon
Well,
version, it makes perfect sense. But
let me be fair,
but
man.
when you talk about possibly like, you know, shifting or moving from one stage of consciousness, whatever that means, to another, then that kind of makes sense to me, just personally. So I thought that was interesting. But what, just one second on circles. I'm not sure if David is here, but he did something very, very interesting about the maybe the most famous circular object in all of Twin Peaks, and that was the fan. So, yeah, David, if you are, oh, you're with the family. Okay, he can't get on mic wise, but maybe later. All right, cool.
I thought you were going to say that donut was the most important
Yeah,
circular
could
object.
be.
It's
But
very
I would
cool.
say check out what he did on the fan at some point if you haven't. I'll link it. But yeah, but the floor is open.
I just wanted to say off the back of what we were talking about, Anthony, that listen, my podcast, is 8 years too late for the big rush of commentary after the return. It benefits entirely from the people that I'm speaking with right now. Like, you know what I mean? I'm that I'm that guy. I was consuming every single piece of information, your books, you know what I mean? Like that's who I am.
But
Yeah.
I think it's also for future generations though, like those that are discovering it now.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the work that I do for my blog is like, I mean, I've been a fan for 31 years, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
and all that stuff. But I know that there'll be a generation that's coming up right now that will discover this through streaming or through whatever, or we're all going to go back to VHS tapes at one day. I don't know. Like it's, and they're gonna, gonna wonder about these sort of things too. So it's like you're giving them like, it's almost like messages from the future, like that you're going back to them. That they'll want to reach out and try to understand these sort of things. So I see it as I've always seen it like that too. Like when it comes to like the analysis and the thinking about this and so forth, it's very much like Harold Smith's living, breathing novel, right? That we
Right.
all have these different um, points of view, these experiences that we have and so forth. And we all view the series, the show, the mythology, whatever it might be, through our own lens, through our own experiences, through our own, backgrounds. We all pick up something different, but it weave together becomes a rich tapestry of the different angles and stories. And so like, I'm not very good at analyzing and now, understanding this and the motivation of that. I can give you the details of when it was manufactured and and who built it, that kind of thing. But I think like that maybe helps give a different point of view, right? From that
Mhm.
perspective. So I think the fact that you have these thoughts and are sharing them, I think it's critical. I think to understanding for not just today, but for those that come, well, like the Bookhouse boys after us, beyond
Well,
that.
I definitely think that the continued deep diving into this analysis, that's an important thing because there's only so many places of loose leaf academia, which is essentially what it is, that you have left to play in, right? Like the surrealism playground. Hey, hey,
Hey, hey, hi
we're here
everybody.
again.
Sorry to be late to the party.
We're here again. Here we are.
We are back.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
continue, please. I just jump right in.
I was
Well,
just
Alice, yeah, go ahead.
I was just telling everybody that, hey, thanks everybody for making all the stuff that you made so that I can make a podcast and then ask if Carl Jung said it. That's it. That's the basic nature of the show, right? That's
Exactly. That's it.
I just,
And
Skeleton Key plus Carl Jung plus Carrie Page is the Dreamer. I got a podcast. There you go.
You're in.
Boom.
It's
Awesome.
done.
That's great.
I know Allison had a bit of a tough work week, and it might be on a bit of a time budget tonight. So if you don't mind, can I just ask you if you came with any gadgets, items, symbols,
Okay, so I don't
objects,
know what the
etc. in
green
mind?
screen, but if you can see, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite
Interesting.
things, right? I got this during the pandemic. It was a one-off that somebody made. It's a piece of stained glass. So I know the owl cave symbol has a lot to it, and there's, I mean, I don't even know if I have an opinion that I've formed necessarily about it, but I have it in my ear. I wear it on this pinky every day. I have my owl cave ring on this hand. I mean, that's my, I have that symbol. I mean, I'm surrounded right now in Twin Peaks stuff. It's just all around me in the background. And here I am in the Salish spa. So, but I think, I mean, the owl cave symbol, I think, I'm trying to think how to say this, like the meaning of it. Let me see if I can do this without belaboring it too far. During the shutdown here, I was very active with people online doing not podcasts but Zooms and having people talk about Twin Peaks, and we did nights where they broadcast the show and we all watched together. There was a lot of that, and so I was definitely doing a lot of retail therapy on Twin Peaks stuff that I could get my hands on, and I've got this one person came up online. I don't even remember how I found it, but it's a jean jacket. And on the back of the jacket is a patch that the person who revived the jacket was an old jean jacket. And that was what he did. He took old used jackets and turned them into more, clothes that people would want based on shows that they loved. So he put a big patch on the back. In fact, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this was the small version of it. And so that was kind of here, and then the big version was on the back. And I was so excited when that jacket showed up. I loved it, but I realized I had put it away because I couldn't wear it around anybody. Nobody was together, right? And after I took it out to wear it, it occurred to me that I love everything that I have. I love all of my paraphernalia because I love the show so much. And there's the part that it's like buying it has to do with other people seeing it and tell you how cool it is, right? It's like that part was missing. Like nobody's adoring my stuff, my swag, yes. Right? And so I related, that was in my mind. So all the Owl Cave stuff is like, I love it because I love the show and I want to be reminded of it all the time. But the meaning of it is more about me connecting with other people who connect with Twin Peaks than it is even necessarily really understanding what the Owl Cave symbol means to me. Like I got my one tattoo, which is a little hard to see, but it's the symbol that's on the secret history of Twin Peaks. It's just the two peaks. Mm-hmm. And this symbol means so much to me because of the book. Right. So that's my relationship to the objects. I feel like, yeah, I mean, I would imagine everyone on this call has lots and lots of Twin Peaks paraphernalia.
Yes.
Let's do a quick show and tell situation. Hold on a second.
He's got
Hi, wait, Tommy, who's your gal?
I'm his wife.
Oh, hi, what's your name?
Heather.
Hi, Heather. I'm Allison. Wow, Tommy, that's awesome.
This is Heather's work.
Heather's
the
cool. You have to get closer.
This was a gift. Yeah, I know. I've got stuff all over the place.
Yeah, show that one more time if you don't mind. I'm going to see if I could.
Go lower, baby. Lower.
Where we're from, the birds sing a pretty song. That is great.
Lovely.
Is it hand painted?
Yeah.
That's great, Heather. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't art.
I do a lot of jean jackets.
That's good to know. Well, I might be in the market for one in the not too distant future. Yeah. I got this was my newest thing. I just got. I don't know, this is this company called Mason Arbor, and they make these wood ornaments. I don't know if you can really, the green screen, but it has the whole city of Twin Peaks in it. It's multi-dimensional. It's a little three-dimensional piece. They had the Welcome to Twin Peaks sign one for a couple of years, which I got when Josh, I think we were in the store at the same time together when I bought it. But this one I just saw show up online. So that's it. Those are my most treasured things.
So listen,
well, I'll go next. I'll go next for show and tell.
Okay,
and
good.
Oh, yes.
I don't have it in front of me, but I have but one object.
That's tell.
One object.
Yeah, it's tell. It's the Great Northern keychain, which is almost completely worn. Yeah, it's almost completely worn down. I had a mug, it broke. There it is. I have one other thing. I have a magnet for the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, I have one of John's magnets, and that's right on my coffee pot. But that's it. Aside from that, it's just I guess mental
I don't
artifacts.
spy a log above your head up there. Is that not a log?
That's a blanket, but I did get.
It sort of looks like the log lady log.
Well, I did get the new Zelda game, and I was given a log at one point by another character, and it was a book. And that was the first time in my life that I considered the fact that the log might be something other than just a piece of wood, that it might be some sort of, device to log things. So
You're having a real when you're a Twin Peaks fan moment, like when everything is about that. Maybe
exactly.
This is not the
It
show.
happens.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Seriously.
Exactly. Yes.
But if anybody wants to jump in the show and tell portion of,
I just wanted to
There's
say
too
that
many
twice I walked off, and when Allison and both Josh were speaking, I'm extremely sorry. One of our kids is still awake. We're doing parenting right now. That's how we're doing it.
Hey man, we're in.
We're parent friendly here for sure.
yeah, we get
All right,
it.
I got to show
100%.
him. And
Come on, let's see
I
it,
also
Josh.
think it's a symbol. So this, can you guys see this? I got
I
a
see
ring
myself.
light.
Yeah, I see Allison.
Looks
But
like
I see
it's,
the picture. It's Laura.
Let me
in
kill
the
my
door,
ring
right?
light. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, kill the ring light, and that'll
Yes.
help.
That's really hard to do. Is the image that's used in Firewalk with Me, and Stephen, you can probably tell me exactly what this is and how many of them there are in the world, but Scott Ryan and I scored 2 of those years ago before the return event came back. I love it as a symbol. It's actually a functional symbol. That is a piece of technology in Firewalk with Me. I mean, that is a pretty dark piece of technology. So I keep it in the corner of my office, and every now and then I'll walk by and I'll go, "Oh, that's really fucking creepy."
It would look nice on your wall, though.
It would look nice on your wall.
It is nice. I mean, the frame I think is perfect for it. So I'm a big fan. I don't have too many Twin Peaks things. I do have a large Dougie Jones cardboard cutout that Showtime sold for a while. Love that. And I didn't go for the Cooper one. I went for the Dougie Jones one. I want the simplicity, the kindness part of it.
Yes.
I'm a big fan.
Now, you say it's very, very interesting to hear you say it's a dark piece of technology. And sorry, Colin, just one sec. Doesn't that, I gotta refresh my memory, but doesn't that piece of technology serve more of a positive function?
I guess
if I remember correctly.
That's all on everyone's interpretation.
I guess, yeah.
Back to the therapy part of Twin Peaks. Right?
Yes.
See, I would argue it could also be seen that it captures her in a way.
Okay.
Like it pulls her into, it's definitely a transitionary piece of talking about moving from one level of consciousness to another. It's certainly a shifting technology in Firewalk with Me, and I would argue it impacts all the way through the return as well. You all know I see Firewalk with Me as a sequel, not a prequel to Twin Peaks, so we don't have to have that discussion again. But there you go.
Yeah,
actually,
cool.
Anthony, I was going to mention is that I have a little show and tell. I mean, I have a whole. Actually, I'll just position it for a moment. But that whole shelf back there is all Twin Peaks stuff that I've slowly accumulated throughout the years. Just gotta give me 1 second to grab one of them because I think it actually is emblematic of why I love doing the show and talking about Twin Peaks. So
do it, Colin.
Yeah,
Get it. Get it.
And while Colin is getting that, I'm just gonna read a couple comments. David is also in the midst of family time and is unable to turn on his devices, but he was saying first a huge OMG twice. I think that was about the fact that Josh has that picture, and then he said I think maybe it kind of helps wake Laura up, or maybe it copies her soul. It copies her soul. That's very, very interesting.
I like that.
I like that too. That's very
like
cool.
Blade Runner shit. I love it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But actually,
yeah, show us your thing, Colin.
So
show us what you got.
This is one that I got back in July, and I feel like of all people, Steven will understand this reference just because of how well versed you are with the props. But for anyone who doesn't know, I'll just show it first, then expand a little further.
Swell gal.
So actually, that was handmade by my friend Hillary from the Full Blossom of the Evening podcast. We did a Harriet Hayward episode together earlier this year. and she took the time to hand make a pillow just like Harriet Hayward's pillow from the pilot. It's like in like a blink and you'll miss. It's like on her bed. It's kind of tucked away. But
Wow.
what I love about it is that I think what makes
So
it so
cute.
emblematic to me is that the reason why I love doing the show and love meeting other fans is that I would say out of other fandoms I've seen throughout the years, Twin Peaks fans are like the most like wildly creative and like diverse group of people in terms of like how they think, how they express their creativity. And the fact that again, my friend Hillary handmade this pillow
So great.
just based off of like one reference. Because me and Steven, we were talking about the replica prop form earlier, where you only have like one reference and you try to work around it, and it looks pretty much screen accurate. Like it was actually the point that Jessica Lundfels, who played Harriet Hayward, actually shared this on Instagram when she saw it. So that was it. Hillary was thrilled about that. So yeah, I guess the short version is that even symbols that seem kind of like blink and you'll miss in Twin Peaks, that it will mean a lot to people. You can connect with other people. Like had I not done the podcast, I wouldn't have met her or Indigo, who's also a host on it. So I don't know. It's just that there's always these creative people, and it's always just like really interesting to hear like what they think, and even just not Twin Peaks, like just knowing who they are just in general.
The question is it Harriet's or is it Donna's? Because according to the
Oh,
script, it's actually Donna's bedroom that she goes in, and it says Harriet's sitting on her. I just found this out when I was working on the
Breaking news.
story about the
breaking
filming
news.
filming location. There was an article in the Everett Herald and about the owners of the house, and was going through the thing. And then, yeah, in the script, it says that it's Donna's bedroom. Now, I don't know why Harriet's hanging out in Donna's bedroom. It's kind of weird.
I mean, I could kind of accept it being Donna's bedroom, but wouldn't she
Yeah,
make a bit of a fuss that Harriet's on her bed,
I
like
know. I'm
comfy
like,
as can be?
she's like hanging out, just like there. So to me, it's weird that either they change that notion, at some point, or whatnot. But yeah, the script calls it for that's the original Northwest Passage script. Now, who knows how much of that actually, remained the way it was, between the December 8th, 1989 script versus what they actually used during the shooting of that. But yeah, it's a great that's a great pillow.
That's cool.
It's
Very,
very
very cool.
cool.
Yeah. And it's such a deep cut that
Yeah.
I think to me, that's why, you talked earlier about the jean jacket and wearing the getting others to, I love my 10,000 Twin Peaks shirts, right?
Right.
Right. I have so many of them and I wear them every place. And the one person, I was in Winter Park, Florida, walking down the street and the person's like, "Hey, nice shirt," and he showed me his tattoo of the owl cave symbol, and he's like, "I'm a fan," same. So that one person that gets it, the one person that that you connect with, it's a shared
Yeah.
bond. It's a
Yeah,
shared.
there's a few things that makes friends in life. Twin
Yeah.
Peaks is one of them. Like if
Yeah.
you can like put your Twin Peaks flag up, chances are you're going to find somebody. Cannabis is another one. It always makes friends.
know-
Or
you know
both together.
You know what's super interesting is that
Can't relate.
so I come from the music world, right? I've played music my entire life, and I'm a songwriter producer for a living. And so the last roundtable that we do, we've got like 5 minutes until we're going to start recording the roundtable. I'm putting the microphone together. I've got everything going and whatnot, and realize that I'm wearing my Directed by David Lynch shirt. And immediately start taking the shirt off and grab something else and whatnot, because that's a cardinal sin. Rule number 1, you never wear the t-shirt of the band that you're in. You can't do, but I'm glad to know we can break that rule here. So now it's game on.
Yeah.
Now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Really, Tommy.
It's the only place
Rick-
where anybody else cares. Come on, you got to do it here.
It was I think might have been 2018, I guess. It was the year after the return. In Los Angeles, there was the Women's March here, and there were 1 million people. I mean, it was the biggest march I've ever been to. And so my husband and I made posters, and we had them on sticks, and my poster said, "Hey haters," and then I put "Fix your hearts or die" and put a big owl cave symbol on it. And like in the middle of this crowd, this woman starts running towards me. Hey, Twin Peaks! She's, the one other Twin Peaks fan in 1 million people. It was awesome. They'll find you.
It's like super interesting, right? And we were talking about this at the last roundtable, how the barrier of entry to be to be a Perfect Strangers fan is like you have a channel changer, right? And the
Right.
barrier of entry to be a Twin Peaks fan is that you have bachelors, or you like, you hang out at the library a lot, right? You're doing far more reading than you ever intended to do. It's good for you. That's great. But it's like you've got two sorts of people who have seen Twin Peaks. The people that they saw it during the initial run, and that's fine, or the people who will never stop watching it and you'll never stop analyzing it. And halfway through your theory will, it'll be shot all to shit and you have to change lanes and go pick somebody else's theory for a while and live in that one.
Yeah, it's true. I in 2019, I think that was the last year before the shutdown happened here. My husband and I every year go to the Hot Rod. It's not the Hot Rod. We go to the Hot Rod Reunion, but it's like the LA Roadster Show to go see. It's a fantastic car show in Pomona, and Candy Clark was there with the American Graffiti booth, right? So I saw Candy Clark because I was not expecting her to be there, and I walked up and I'm like, oh my God, Doris! I touched her, and she said to me, you're here? You're asking me about Twin Peaks or something? She said to me, you Twin Peaks people are the weirdest people. I just, I mean, I had a great conversation with her, but she said, you guys are out there people.
It's an odd bunch, and let me use that as a transition to say hi to Joel. Nice
Hello.
to see
Hi,
you again,
Joel.
Joel.
Hi, Joel.
Hang on, I'm going to
And
open the door. I'll be right back.
I thought you'd actually see me tonight, but then I got really delayed and I didn't have time. My phone was dead. And
Oh,
so
good.
here I am, audio only once again.
I don't
Sorry.
think I've ever seen you, Joel, on any of the podcasts we've been on. So
I've been
it's awesome.
in some of them. I've been in some of them.
Yeah, I
This is
thought
great
that
to
was
meet
your
you.
Once
gimmick.
time to time.
That's the good. Yeah.
My computer's not in a good spot for webcam, so I usually use my phone when I do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, my phone just died. I had a last minute thing to go to at 7, so here I am.
All good. Technology is going to kill us all one day, buddy. It's all
it's
good.
good.
At least I got the logo up this time. Last time it was just my name. I finally figured out. I was like, oh, I'm not signed in. That's why it won't do it. So I got that going at least.
Now, Joel, you wanted to come sort of prepared with an idea or two, or like a item or symbol or two. Is that still the case? Did you have something in mind?
Well, I think you dissuaded me, so now I didn't.
Oh, okay.
But I
Okay.
mean, no, I've definitely thought of some stuff, but I'm kind of curious. I mean, I know I missed some part of it, but I'm kind of curious to hear what other people bring, and then if there's something that's like left unsaid or something like that, maybe I'll jump in. But I mean, I'll jump in, but maybe I'll jump in with another object. I mean,
Yeah, you got it. One thing we briefly touched upon was the little horse, Carrie Page's mantle, and just how interesting that is at that moment. Then we kind of shifted gears before digging into that, and we might not dig into that at all. But then we kind of ended up in a show and tell round. But since you're not on camera, you're not going to show any of your stuff. But I did want to ask Steve. I did want to ask Steven because he was sort of my like unofficial guest of honor tonight, and because I wanted to meet him, and also I'm not sure who knows more about like objects and items from the show than him. So was there anything, Stephen, that you wanted to like either like personal artifacts or things from the show that are just amongst your favorite or maybe the most interesting?
Well, I think it would make sense that the one object that I'm still trying to identify, and I think it was probably one of those objects that were made for the movie, is Sam Stanley's Whitman machine. It's the machine that, and that he finds the splinters and, he finds, and so forth. And for someone who gets obsessive with trying to find the history of this or document that and so forth, I guess I have a lot of connectedness to Sam's machine. I think it's an oscilloscope that maybe was modified to add in like a view, like a viewfinder to look down and so forth, and they cut out part of it, and such, because you can see it kind of beeping. You can see other oscilloscopes that have that same kind of like technology, but boy, I'd love to find the original on that one. And the question is, where is that original thing now? Is it gone? Is it locked somewhere in a vault, and whatnot? But I think for me, that's probably just knowing my drive of trying to archive and document a lot of this history. That's probably where what I get probably identify with the most in terms of stuff. I have tons of other books and everything. I've been acquiring like, the Rolling Stone issues and just trying to, to scan this and that and the other thing, because that's more the actual reality of the thing, trying to archive a lot of those pieces, the advertisements and the various ephemera that was part of the show. I mean, like the infamous Star Picks cards, and the various other things that were all part of this, that grew out of this television show that was only on for 2 seasons in the early 90s. And yet people still identified, and there was such a merchandising thing, and how even decades later, people are still trying to find these items. So I think that those are probably the objects that I identify with the most, particularly ephemera, because that stuff people just didn't keep. Like, you don't have the piece of paper from this or the menu from that or whatnot. So those become the more rare items to try to find.
Are there any breakthroughs that you had that are still memorable to
Oh,
this
well,
day?
I think Gordon Cole's mural, that's still the one that that was an actual mural that was sold. And I did buy one. I was able to find one, but it's one my wife said no, so I can't put it up. But it's an idea I'd love to have. But it's like, the way that they sold it was rolled, but it's like these 16 by 16 inch squares. So you have to like put them perfectly together and then attach. Like, it's not just one big rolled sheet, which is what I thought it was. But that mural, I think, was fun to find, and that was finding it using the technology of the day, through Google reverse image searches and various other things. You know, if you wait long enough, the internet has it, out there, and it'll eventually turn up in some way. But that was a fun one, just because it was so iconic, and again, I love the first 30 minutes of the film. So that to me was was a fun one to find.
And not to reveal any secrets or sources or anything, but have you accumulated like pathways toward getting the information you want? Do you have certain avenues you turn to, or people you could tap into, or is it
Not
mostly you and your
mostly,
computer?
it's mostly it started out with Google image searches,
Hmm.
and looking at that, which then turned to eBay searches. To pickclick.com is a great one. You can go through and look at all the eBay items, returned. A new site is it's Kagi, KAGI.com. You pay for that. But it's a search engine. Right now, Google's going through some things where they're pushing a lot of ads, they're pushing a lot of like paid sponsored posts and so forth, and you get lost in the searches and not being able to find stuff. And Kagi kind of removes all that stuff, and you can get to the actual results you want a little bit better. It's like $5 a month, but I've been able to find, just cutting through some of that stuff is great. And then it's just persistence, just waiting. Just keep. I might do something, go back to it, wait a couple months, go back to it, try to find it again. Just thinking a lot and trying to think about how they would have produced something, when it comes to either the locations or when it comes to the things, like what are those things. And then newspapers.com, it's my favorite site, and so much research is out there that people have thrown away stories. I found an article just yesterday about costumes that I had not seen yet, and just what they were doing when it came to designing stuff. So that becomes the basis of other future things. But yeah, those are great. Vinny, on the other hand, has made some connections with folks like Jeff and some other Dave Robinson, other folks that worked on the show. So you have those sort of things. My dream one day is to actually have all those production Bibles and the various other things out there that someone has, and that would answer so many questions about things. But meanwhile, it's a fun
Yeah,
mystery to solve.
I remember
that's cool.
we had talked about maybe doing a museum someday and having a place where we could gather all those things.
It'd be
And
great, just to have that. And that was the intent of trying to scan a lot of these things and just make them available, was just so that people could enjoy them as such. I mean, I've downloaded, I want to say, probably 5,000 articles, if not more, and it just going through and trying to catalog them and edit them down to date, put them in order of the date and that sort of thing. And eventually I'll have that all available so people can find that stuff easier, when it comes to
Be
research.
so great.
Yeah. I mean, in like all the TV guide stuff recently was, all these here was just because I had seen references to interviews with like quotes or that sort of thing from a TV guide article. And so I was trying to find the original of that. And we talked about this some at the Real Twin Peaks event earlier this year when it comes to archiving or that sort of stuff. Like here we are now, 30 some years on, almost 35 years on.
Mhm.
And a lot of that history and a lot of that how they created, like I think back to the owl cave conversation earlier, the owl symbol. Like if you look at the script, there's no mention of an actual owl symbol. They mention a hieroglyph, in the script. And they leave because they want to like excavate it correctly. And then Wyndham Earl gets there and he finds it and so forth. But there's no mention of that, the dowel, with the owl. So they must have created that through conversations, through the art design, and through through Lynch or Frost's influence to actually make that thing. So somebody did, and they wrote the script in January of '91. So like there had to be some type of conversation. But how do they get to that? I'd love to know, like that. But as 35 years later, boy, those memories maybe just aren't as fresh in people's minds. And so trying to go back to sources like TV guides or newspapers and so forth to try to maybe pick up, glean a little bit of this, that, or the other thing on how some of those things came to be is something I find important.
I think it's so great what you're doing and what you were just saying, because when somebody's wrapped up in this show, there's so many things to attend to, and an overwhelming amount of information that you're not likely to be thinking of. Oh, look at that, custom made, homemade prop over there. Or, maybe once in a while you'll notice a cool piece of furniture and you're like, that was like homemade, and
Well,
still,
like Lynch's,
track the story and whatnot. But
yeah, David Lynch's lamps appear in season
yeah,
3.
Right, right.
but
They
looking,
think about
borrowing your point of view once in a while and just like looking through that perspective, it just makes me realize just what a total and complete like work of art, every element. I don't want to overstate it, maybe not every single element, but it just seemed to be such an art project without, without any of the like
I
snootiness
agree.
attached to that word.
Having done so much research on this now in recent years, I have such now an appreciation. Like, okay, when you get mixed up in the music, and that's great, in the mood and the vibe and the characters, or in the great snappy dialogue and just entertaining, and the mystery of it all and that kind of stuff. But really researching more and more of this, I have such an appreciation for the crew and what they did to make all this, and how that they're just so passionate about, and I think that I talk a lot at work just about culture and leadership style and so forth. So here we've always heard stories about David Lynch and being a certain way on set and being a certain type of director and very welcoming, and and people, he hires the same people because they will walk through fire for him. So he's creating I think in many ways a culture of this creativity, he's drawing this out of people either through just his demeanor, through his things. And granted, we see in the behind the curtain footage. I mean, yes, he does swear. He didn't want plaster of Paris bullshit. He wanted, something else in the woods in Olali State Park, but that's all they had. So, you see him in the creative process, but through all of it, I think that the crew gets inspired and they feel just like, again, they are pouring their heart and soul into these kind of things, so that you do have this thing like an owl cave symbol that they had to manufacture. They had to create this. It became such an iconic thing throughout then the rest of the film and the season 3, et cetera, et cetera. But that was born out of that creativity in some way, like that's neat to see, and I have such more of appreciation, I think, now for that.
And arguably that's why some of the people in this virtual room tonight are still carrying that symbol. That in some way it's whatever it means within the show. In some way it's an icon, like, for the show, and not just for this show we like, but this show we like because of it's like more packed with soul than like almost any other thing we've encountered. I could speak rather confidently for, I would say, at least a handful of us, so that is somehow bleeding through, even from that original shift from the not being mentioned in the script to somehow being fashioned, maybe on the fly and all that sort of homemadeness
Mhm.
is gives the whole endeavor, like I think a deeper element that people connect to. Like, that when Andy is in the fireman's in the black and white scene and he has this little genie lamp, like you're not going to find that at Bed Bath and Beyond or whatnot. That's one of my favorite items. I don't have any deep thoughts about it, but does anybody else have any thoughts that pop to mind when you think of that lamp?
Actually, I one thing that's probably worth mentioning about that lamp in particular, or more so the scene rather, is that I
Mhm.
do view that scene with Andy and the fireman as being the most important scene in all of Twin Peaks.
Ah,
And the thing is that actually, you and Steve were kind of talking about it. Is stuff that David Lynch handmakes, and I think that's what really permeates, even at least subconsciously, with the Return, because no one would ever expect 70-plus-year-old David Lynch making an 8-hour movie to get his hands on knees the way he did. But actually, Anthony, you made a good point back when I was still on Twitter about Duncan Todd's office, and you asked if that was handmade by David Lynch, and I didn't even think about it until you brought it up. I was like, maybe. I mean, he got his hands and knees to create Philip Jeffries for Part 15 and Part 17. But yeah, I think they're just like some that just kind of osmotically kind of makes its way through because Lynch is so like on his hands and knees making all this stuff. As for the lamp itself, though, to cycle back, I admittedly I don't know what it means particularly pertaining to the scene, but because it's like so important because Andy learns like everything, like whether how much he does or doesn't retain is one thing, but the fact that he is just presented with all this knowledge, he moves people to position Part 17, and how important lamps are because even during daytime shots you see the lamps are just turned on in any given room. So you make a really good
hmm.
point about that lamp and its likely significance to the rest of the story.
Got a
Yeah,
light?
it's interesting. Yeah, exactly. Um, the function of that item is that it appears suddenly in Andy's hands after Andy suddenly appears in the room. So it's not placed there. It just sort of like appears and then projects some sort of smoky
Don't you
message.
think
I don't
like
know.
Lynch went for dinner and they gave him the tinfoil food thing and he was like, this is
That's
really
Yeah.
good to go.
cool, right?
I was just gonna
Wow.
say that I think, Lynch is just a real artist and you can't stop yourself from getting in there and just making things with your hands when you're like that. And it really shows in his work, and I think that people just really love that about it. I mean, I just that's just how I view it. I don't think he can stop himself, and I don't think he can let
Hmm.
other people do it.
Well, I almost wonder though, like, and I think about some of the films I love is, the handcrafted nature of things. Today, obviously, and in season three, certainly with they had their CGI type, effects and they were
Yeah,
added stuff, but there's still something about the handcrafted nature of
right.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that the models were actually models, that they created, and that there is a sense of
And
passion, love, and
it's
dedication.
real.
It's real. It's intangible. That exists in time and space. I love that. I think that's why I think it does add to the richness of the show, and why people identify with it because there is something different, about
Right.
how it was produced and how it was made.
But Stephen, your quest, it's a lot less esoteric than it may seem, right? It's a lot less. I mean, it has its roots particularly into the narrative of this specific property because any of these tangible items are liable to be an undiscovered gateway, maybe
Hmm.
now through a series of pieces of information that you can put together and or later from continued narrative, right? And that's the oddest part about it. Anything that you can track down and find some key piece of information added with the benefit of retroactivated storytelling and or just further storytelling could then suddenly be a piece of information no one ever knew that they could put together and go widespread, because that's the nature of our community, right? So for us, it's a noble endeavor. And that's the nature of surrealism in general. Any piece of information that's happening with inside the surrealism could be the key piece of information. And then, of course, it could be the key piece of information for just your understanding, just your interpretation. So that's neat. And then also, it could become the actual key piece of information, right? There's like nothing esoteric about the endeavor that you've taken on. It's it's a truly needed endeavor if you're this community.
And to
Hey,
me,
here, here.
Yeah.
well, and I think, it is that there is no greater thrill than when you find that thing. I imagine like the fictional Indiana Jones when he found the thing, and again that sense of like pure joy, right? Of like and it's hard to bottle and hard to put into words, but it's just this sense of like, wow, that's it, kind of thing, only to be replaced with some other thing that comes along from that. But in the moment, that pure delight is just, it is added to the richness of my experience with the show.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it is this kind of like these things, that these forgotten moments, these forgotten stories, these forgotten connections. I mean, when the series was out, there's all these costume contests that people had, or these viewing parties. Or I found in Durham, North Carolina, there was JC's had a haunted house in 1990 that was, one room of the haunted house was Twin Peaks themed, and they put it in a newspaper article, and that was like a draw to get people to go to the show or go to see the house, and $3 admission, and it benefits the JC. I know the house was. I know I've never seen a photo of it, but there was such a fervor of a thing, but that's lost to time. I mean, like, people don't remember some of those pieces. Does it unlock anything else? I don't know, but it might unlock a memory for somebody, and I think that's, to your point, it does, when put together. If I'm finding something, then all of a sudden someone else remembers, oh yeah, I remember that, and then it just unlocks some other part of a story. I think that goes back to that living, breathing novel concept of what I've seen in this show.
Yeah, and irrefutably, it's a strong idea. If you guys actually did have, like a tangible walk-in museum style of place, I think. I mean, and look, there's no lack of content that you couldn't get out of that too, from your perspective, right? And we would all love that and benefit from that, right? It would ricochet off of everybody's content and everybody's materials and everybody's thought process and writings, so that would be astounding.
Look at the Snoqualmie Valley Historical Museum that introduced a exhibit during the Real Twin Peaks day this past year in February, and talking to Christy Lake, the executive director for that group, saying that over that weekend they had more people visit than they did all year long in the previous year. Like they had 800 whatever it is. Like, and to me, that's, they all came to see the chair, right? Jason Mattson's chair from season 3, and other stuff, memorabilia, and stuff that Vinny had provided and Carl provided, all these other folks provided, that were on display, and they kept it, the exhibit up for several months beyond that. But that weekend, it was certainly a drive because people wanted to come and see and be immersed in something physical, those physical items, those physical things that they could see and touch. And we've talked a little bit about it back during that time too. It's like this show, unlike a Space 1999 or a Star Trek or other things, you can't go to the other planets, to visit that. You can't do that, but you can walk in these spaces here. You can physically see these things here, on because it's grounded on Earth, right? It's grounded in this world. So again, I think you're right. I think having those things that again, those symbols, those objects, those items connect us in some way, because we either had that growing up, or we remember that growing up, or we just identified with it because it's the thing that we took away from watching the show.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even think about it, but I was very lucky. I got to go to the Festival of Disruption a couple times when it was here in LA, and I can't remember, there was a jewelry group that had like did some jewelry for the show, Annie and something. And they made this perfume as part of the thing. And I just keep it on the desk because when I smell it, it just totally transports me. You know, I have two. I've got this is for the Ace Hotel, and then this, of course, for any of you who don't know, the wood fire candle by Illume is what the smell is in the Salish Lodge. So when you go into this hotel here that I'm sitting in right now, it smells like this candle, and I just, oh, it just transports me back.
He has one.
On Earth. Yes.
Am I right, Colin?
Yeah, no, actually, I was gonna say that there was a Twin Peaks burlesque show in Buffalo where I live, and so actually I had a pre-party with a bunch of fans, and I once again have to credit 1400 River Road. It is a Garmonbozia scented candle, and it was my first time really putting it out there, and this thing was going on for like at least 5+ hours, and it really, believe it or not, it really helped add the vibe of the party.
What does the Garmonbozia smell like?
Sadness.
I mean, it's definitely pain and sorrow, but
Sorrow.
normally that's not something you want at a party. But I figured this was like kind of the exception.
I would imagine it smell. I mean, if it's corn, it might smell like what, buttered popcorn or something.
Yeah,
That
there's actually a bit of a buttery smell to it, so it does. I mean, pain and sorrow, but pain and sorrow can smell at least pretty good.
That actually kind of brings to mind something I was thinking earlier, and then we kind of got off of the owl cave symbol. But you know how Lynch changes it in Firewalk with Me, where it's like elongated for some reason, and
Yeah.
I haven't heard that many theories on it, but there's one that always stuck with me from the Dugpa forums. To give credit where due, it was a user who went by the name of Fernanda, I think, or no, there was another name they used, but that's I had to attribute them for something at one point, and that was what they asked me to attribute them by, I think. So they had a theory that the owl cave symbol, as seen in Firewalk with Me, is actually a corn stalk, which I love.
I've never heard that before.
They're the only person I've heard say that, and I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. I love it.
You just reminded me of something. I was actually watching the Antique Roadshow one day, and they had this weird picture that was actually like an embroidered thing. That was a framed picture, and there was a corn stalk up the side, and the top of it looked like the symbol. And I took a picture of it on the TV and I showed it to you. Remember that?
Oh,
I
wow.
was just like, oh my God, look at this. But I was like, but just, everything is Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
you know?
you're always, is this
maybe not,
real,
maybe
or do I
not.
just think everything happens to be about this?
But I saw that.
Well, it's funny too, because I feel like the owls were, or at least Lynch has said, those were Frost's thing. And the corn is definitely a Lynch thing. So it makes me wonder, but I mean, I would have assumed he was the one who drew the original owl cave anyways. So I don't know if he changed it or if someone else drew it and he tweaked it or what. But like Steven said, it would be a fascinating process to be able to document of where the various evolutions.
He has the framed corn image in his office, and
right, and the atomic bomb right next to it.
Yeah,
actually, on the top.
And why does it? Yeah, no, go ahead. But I'm just bookmarking my question for later. Why would he have that framed? Why would that character have that framed corn stalk in his office?
Because he's David Lynch.
Yeah. No, actually, I guess
it gets meta.
I guess it may or may not tie into this, but when you mentioned the elongated owl cave symbol looking like a stalk of corn, it made me think. I'm shocked I didn't bring this up yet, but Hawk's ledger that he shows to Frank Truman in The Return, it's just chock full of like all this like brilliant symbology, and Hawk does actually tell Frank about the blackened corn that's disease, and like I think there's a turkey next to it. And that may or may not pertain to when Laura says she's like gone like a turkey in the corn.
Yeah.
The
turkey jerky at the store.
Yeah, like that's the thing that
Sarah Palmer freaks out about. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like those are like three scenes that seem like they'd be relatively unrelated, but I think about them in close proximity a lot more than I probably should. But I just wasn't sure if anyone really thought about the legend in particular and if there was certain symbology that they got from it.
Yeah, I'm about to deep dive into an episode of our show, and it goes. Jung's fascinated by both animals. Clearly, anybody who's ever read Jung knows that he's on about animals as often as he could possibly be. but also farming and corn. And so cut to me like for 2 weeks in the bedroom trying to parse through the dense information, which is Jung, to try to understand how, from at least Mark Frost's perspective, what is happening with that. But you're right that there's no possibility that that's unrelated. It's too, by its nature of being so strange, especially the jerky scene, that, it's so strange by its nature. I haven't heard anyone reconcile it perfectly yet, but I'm sure I can throw Carl Jung at it, man.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Well, my friend texted me today about Garmonbozia, and he said he was listening to something, and he said maybe when people want to eat the maybe when entities want to eat the Garmonbozia, they're doing that to help, like to take it away, like they're trying to remove some of the sorrow or suffering. And I thought that was an interesting take on it.
There's
Except
some
for
really that's an interesting that also takes me back to the Dugpa message boards, because I feel like there were these fascinating conversations. This was sort of like between, I don't know, the missing pieces and the return, where people were discussing mythology. And I think, again, it's hard to remember who sort of came up with what, but I remember kind of getting into the idea that maybe the different spirits, it's almost like how gods represent different values. It's like they're not all chasing pain and sorrow. The little man / Mike, whatever you want to, however you want to categorize those entities, maybe they're consuming pain and sorrow, and Bob is consuming, what did they say on the series? Was it fear and the pleasures? Something like that. So maybe they're actually consuming different emotions, and depending what emotional state the human gets into, they feed off of that. And you could say that Bob thrives when Leland is in denial of some sort, or is cultivating, because there's also an ambiguity about whether they're feeding off of the host or the host's victims, or both. You could say that Bob profits from Leland when Leland is in that state of like denial and avoiding what he's done. And a part of Mike and the little man's victory is Leland having to feel some kind of pain and sorrow and actually recognize what he's done. And that's part of their victory over Bob. And I've always loved that idea of like, it's not just this mythology up here where the gods are playing chess with the people or whatever. There's like an actual emotional resonance to all the pieces. And I think sometimes it works better than other times. I'm always kind of felt like Fire Walk with Me does a lot of stuff, which then the return can kind of, I think the return can take things in a different direction that sometimes I find less, like the Owl Cave Ring in particular, if we're talking about objects. I feel like in the return, and I, forgive me, I think I've discussed this on the show with Anthony before, so I'm repeating myself, but I get a sense sometimes that it becomes more about like transporting people to the lodge or something a little more straightforward. Whereas in Firewalk with Me, it's very deeply associated with these kind of psychological motivations and this idea of like knowledge about Teresa and about her knowledge about Leland and Laura's knowledge that somehow this ring, the ring almost becomes like a symbol of the crime that Leland committed against Teresa, which was, covering up the crime he had earlier committed and would eventually commit with Laura. And so like wielding the ring in the train car at the end becomes this kind of showing him, no, I know what you did type thing. And it has all these different levels to it, which are so rich. And then I feel like in the return, it becomes a little more basic in a way. So I don't know.
Actually,
Anthony, to expand on the concepts of your extremely intuitive friend who texted you earlier with that piece of information, I think at the heart of what's happening, the reason for eating the pain and sorrow is that you're seeing a representation of suppression, right? So to believe that what we're seeing is a representation of the personal unconscious. Of course, you're clashing with complexes and archetypes, and then you're clashing with regression in the form of autonomous creations. It wouldn't be the job of repression, if that's manifest as a physical characterization, it wouldn't be the job of that to necessarily manifest pain and sorrow. It would be to suppress it, to take it away, to not let you deal with it, to not, because if the battle is in someone's mind and the game is good versus bad, repression versus individuation, then the job of the bad, the repression, would be to shut down the ability to have to face pain and sorrow. Right?
Actually, Tommy, this kind of goes for anyone, but Tommy, since you mentioned it, I was thinking about it as we were talking about the last 5 minutes, but I think of the first time that cream corn is really talked about in Twin Peaks by order of release, and it would actually be The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, because with Jennifer Lynch, obviously, she's a bit removed from the show, but Laura does talk about in one of her early diary entries that her favorite thing to eat is, I believe it's potato pancakes with cream corn just on it. Where do you stand with Laura relative to her ingesting the cream corn?
That does sound. I like both of those foods, by the way, for the record. Sorry to interrupt.
Together,
or it sounds like together. I'll take them separately or together.
Cream corn.
But anyway, go ahead.
You're a cream corn guy.
Big time. But anyway, go ahead, Colin.
I don't think I've ever met anybody who's a cream corn guy. Anthony, that's you.
But Colin, I'm sorry to interrupt your point.
Oh no, I think I said everything I needed. Just with it being the first time, like by order of release, that it was addressed, and come back to Laura in particular, because we're talking about through the lens of lodge entities or pain and sorrow, but we're talking about like middle school girl at this point and eat her favorite thing for breakfast. So I wasn't sure how Garmonbozia or cream corn kind of fits in relative to what we're talking about with Leland and the lodge spirits.
Yeah, and in a positive context, the first mention.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, I think, the question of what the purpose of like consuming the creamed corn and it is an interesting, I guess, thing about that scene with Leland is when they consume the creamed corn, he is healed in a weird way. Like he has that stomach wound and Bob touches it and the blood disappears. And I've heard interpretations that, this is him being reset in a way. That's why the next morning he acts like nothing happened. He's able to repress it. So I think there's something to that. But at the same time, I have to say, I think in Firewalk with Me, I've always really just responded to the little man, the Treemans, basically everybody in that, all the spirits in that film, except for Bob, as if they're essentially helping Laura on a journey, or maybe for their own purposes, selfish, if you can call it that, and if that's the level they operate on. But they are basically taking her on a journey of understanding versus Bob. Bob, I see, is more the figure of repression. And because every scene that they're featured in, they're showing something to Laura that then leads her, and, talk about objects and their psychological associations. It's like, every time there's like a crisis for the characters, they're shown some sort of object that has like, but by a spirit, which then leads them to some further discovery. So it's like Laura loses the diary. She got no outlet anymore. These spirits show up with a picture of an open door, and that leads her back to her house where she sees Bob in the room. And that's, one more revelation there. And Bob, Leland, the one-armed man, is waving the ring in his face, and then he has the flashback to Teresa's murder and so forth. It's like all these moments in the film where these non-people, these figures pop up, you get these kind of breakthroughs in a way. Which is interesting.
To cast, Bob is an agent of the Great Mother. Right, because the dreamer has it out. Number one, the dreamer wants to absolve the father through the notion of Bob, through the agency of repression, right? Because how else could you possibly live in a day-to-day external world if you couldn't philosophize, something ethereal, regarding how something that dramatic and terrible could happen to you. So the personal unconscious manifests this evil that men do to justify the actions of the father, right? And so we get that in the form of Bob. But then, of course, he's an agent of the Great Mother, the archetype of the Great Mother, Carl Jung's Great Mother. And this is the person that she takes out all her vitriol on, right? This is the person that she reserves, that the dreamer casts the Great Mother as the ultimate grand evil, right? The final boss. And the reason for that, I think, is because the Great Mother should have had the opportunity to protect and take care of. And it's just like Carl Jung is on about. It's like, this is the reason why we cast, the evil queen rather than the evil king. This is why, right? You've reserved all of this angst, whether it's fair or it's not fair, into this mother character. We've done the same thing here with Mother or Judy or the experiment. It's the same thing. So it's interesting how those things parallel. Heather's got this picture for you if you want to see it. The corn. Going back to the corn again. You should title this "The Round Table of Corn."
Corn.
Can you just
it's all about the corn.
Your mic cut out as soon as you said Heather's name. What was the sentence that you just said, Tommy?
It did. Am I there? Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, you're here.
Yeah.
It was just that one sentence.
Okay, I said Heather has that picture that she took from the. Okay, can you see that symbol?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, let me hang on one sec. I keep talking, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now, there's also
I always
a case to be made.
yeah, for sure. Well, I always thought, because I like to be on the Frostian side, that my case was always
Frostian.
that
We're
Frostian. Woohoo, Tommy. Everybody drink.
Have fun.
That that the corn relates back to Mark because of corn subsidies. That from his environmental background, that
Right.
and political, that he would have attached to corn because of that. I don't know. When I went down a little bit of a cornhole on that subject a bit, and I found some really interesting. I learned a lot about corn
Right.
subsidies at the time that I was researching it that I would never have expected to even pay any attention to. But yeah, I found an article and it said something like, the whole article was cornography. It was all the, which I have never forgotten, the great cornography. But
Actually,
anyway.
Alison, I think you bring up a really good point because I didn't even think about it until actually I bought a thing of cream corn for a Twin Peaks party I did for Twin Peaks Day a couple years ago. But I went to a local supermarket and I bought a can. And now, bear in mind, by 2022, like inflation was on the rise, and food prices, that was a big point of contention of how they were going up. And I have this can of cream corn for 50 cents. I was like, this has been 50 cents for at least the last 20 or 30 years. What is going on? Like, what? Because I always think of, like, processed food in particular, because actually I brought this up in a few episodes of my show, but I think food is a very important part, and it says a lot about certain characters in the return.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
for example, Chantal and Hutch, they eat junk food all the time. And I actually used to work at an organic food store, and it was always talking about how corn products are the first ones to be modified and how it's like unnatural, it's processed. And then you look at people such as Norma, who, when she talks about what makes the double R so special, it's about local ingredients. It's about making something that's special. It's not about a profit. It's about making something you're very passionate about. Or actually, Chad, to cycle back to food that's bad, he doesn't have one. He has 2 TV dinners that he's eating in the conference room, and this is a thing that deters him from opening the door. I don't think there's really symbology to it, but just that. No, I think the food that people eat in the return, it's very informative of who they are as people. And I think you're right about the whole
always stuffing his face.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that you're right that Mark Frost, he would have that more socio-political angle of like, what it means that food is more centralized and like how it can be detrimental if you ingest the wrong foods over time. Because whenever there's the socio-political stuff, I usually pertain it towards Frost. Not that Lynch would ever be adverse to it. It's just that from what I've read in conversations with Mark Frost, that's just kind of like my takeaway from him.
He's loud.
Yeah. Well, I think Garmonbozia, though, got introduced in Fire Walk with Me, right? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't part of that. So I, it's a stretch maybe to say that the corn was related to his corn thing, but maybe it was from prior conversations, about it. But with Hutch, I always thought with Chantel that, she's eating she's eating cheese crisps, you know, those whatever they are, they're Cheetos basically. It's all cornmeal, right? So it's like it's quick Garmonbozia.
I'm actually not sure if this is worth addressing. I think that again, come back to conversation with Mark Frost. It's pretty clear that Mark Frost does not really care much for Firewalk with me. But when I think of the return, I think Frost said that him and Lynch talked every day for at least like an hour for a year before they even put pen to paper.
Right.
So I think they were just kind of talking about like these elements that they were very passionate about. And you know, they'd find crossover. Like for example, you know, Garmonbozia is like pain and sorrow to Lynch, but you know, but Mark Frost could probably find a way to integrate the way he saw it. And like I was saying, you know, the processed food and like how he sees that in the modern society.
Yeah.
Hey, Anthony. I love the fact I love to be I love that I'm getting to be a Twin Peaks fan, peripheral fan-made media content creator, because dude, you have a show right now that's about the technology of Twin Peaks, and we've decided that the greatest technology is corn. Right? Like we're the only people to where that decision would have been made. Hey man, we're gonna hang out with you for just a couple more minutes, and then my wife is gonna go off to bed, and I'm gonna put the 8-year-old off to bed.
The kiddos off to bed. Yes.
You got
it. Can I ask you a question before you go, or be one of the people who asks a question before you go?
Certainly.
Tommy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm curious with you guys. I've just sort of, so maybe this is answering your podcast. I just downloaded Dreamer's Diary. It's on my playlist. I haven't gotten to listen to it yet, but I'm curious where you kind of alluded to it, but where you see Judy fitting into this, in the sense that, you know, your theory sort of, I think, if I understand it correctly, takes a comprehensive view of Twin Peaks as like all sort of emanating from Carrie Page. Do you see the story as kind of proceeding in different phases? Because I would argue from what you said before that you could almost say, you know, just like a dream kind of evolves as a dream's going.
Right.
That if we're going to take that there, you could almost say she deals with the father, and then in the latter, you know, in the last part of the dream, let's say, the idea of the great mother enters into it. Because you hear the whispered Judy and Firewalk with Me, but I don't think that concept is really in play in the first parts. It's something that kind of comes about at the end. And it's almost like she's dealt with what Leland has done to her directly, and what's left now to deal with in some way is the mother. Because like when Cooper says to her at the door, is your father Leland? She's just like, no, like she's not flustered at all. And then he says, is your mother Sarah? And she's like, what? Like starts to freak out. So I guess if you guys just want to take that ball and run with it in your last few minutes, if I can send you in that direction, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the chronology of Judy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And also one more thing. Sorry. You were talking about Frost bringing it, you know, maybe Frost came in after Lynch came up with the corn and he put his own spin on it for the return. To what extent do you think Frost, being maybe the more Jungian, put his spin on Judy in the return?
Well, okay. So
sorry, that's a lot to dig into.
No. It's cool.
Go for it.
I won't take a super long time on this because this is not it's not the Dreamer's Diary panel. And I love you cats, and I would not be making anything if it hadn't have been for listening and analyzing and being entertained by so many people's information and appearances, and that's everyone that I'm talking to right now. Yeah, our unique take on it, or at least mine, is that you've got 2 points of entry for a cognitive fugue to occur. And during this cognitive fugue, time and chronology is a real issue, right? And that's why we're confronted by this concept of, is it future or is it past? Because the idea is, and we've seen this with other Lynchian work, where you're not quite certain how long the external life of a dream is. The internal life of a dream, you saw it for 2 hours, you thought it was a long time, but the external life, it could have been just in a gunshot. The internal life could have been just a split second. And I think that the first split second that happens that creates Twin Peaks as this like cover for trauma which is also sort of a death revenge fantasy that a girl perpetuates on a town that should have known better. It's sort of like a demented, A Wonderful Life, if you will, that then turns into like more of an individuation process. I think that happens to her early on, and it probably happens in an instance of trauma. And then later on, it happens in her life because the cyclical nature of trauma, if you don't deal with it, if you don't rationalize your shadow self, the cyclical nature of trauma will dictate that you will then go on to be traumatized yet again or be engaged in those decisions.
Cycle continues.
Right. So then later on, she experiences something very similar to probably in the moment that she shot a guy who happens to be on the couch that she owns. Right. That's what it looks like to me. So what is Judy and what's the chronology of that? I think that there's evidence that she's been blaming Sarah Palmer, the surrogate mother figure, probably the face of her real mother in real life. I think she's been blaming her for a long time. She first accuses her of being asleep and unaware, right? Then she sort of accuses her of being incompetent and irrational. And then she accuses her of being the demon that set all of this about. And all of this is an irrational finger pointing, by the way. It's not correct. It's those levels you have to get through where you go, listen, I have to reconcile this. Yes, she should have done something. Yes, she should have been aware. However, I can't lay at the feet of her this person who did what they did. Right. And that's how I see it. I see that that it happens twice. I think you have an interesting idea, though, that in one case, she's trying to rationalize, then she demystifies the idea of the father, because clearly in Fire Walk with Me, we stop going, oh, well, Leland's off the hook. He never did anything wrong. And then in Fire Walk with Me, we go, he wasn't that great of a dude. Let's look at it. Let's see what he did for a living and who he did it for. This ain't a great guy. Right. So you're right. Like, there is a case to be made that the first traumatic incident that creates the cognitive fugue sets off this whole thing to rationalize the father and then deal with the trauma of that. And the second
denial
one
of it.
Yeah. And then the second one would be about the mom. She hasn't done it yet. And when we see them back in the lodge, you've got a defense mechanism and a persona that's waiting to be reactivated and deployed again, should she ever need them, because now the real work begins, now that she's woken up. And I think that's what happens at the end of the return, is that she wakes up into a brand new state of self.
She reached individuation.
She's either going to do the work or she ain't. And if she doesn't, well, that's all good for us because we'll have more show. You know what I mean?
That was awesome. Can you say it over? Can you repeat it?
Every week.
Every week.
Excellent. I can't wait to listen to that again. That was awesome.
I mean, that gave me a thought too of like that last shot where she's whispering Cooper's ear. I mean, I'll say my assumption most of all is she's whispering something about Cooper, but I will say you gave me another idea as well, which is, we know that the first time she whispers, she says, "My father killed me." So, right. Maybe this time she's whispering something about the mother.
Yeah, or she's whispering, I'm Carrie Page, or she's whispering, "We're not real," or she's...
Sure, but I mean, just in the sense of rhyming with the original whisper. That's
she's whispering,
an interesting thought that I hadn't thought of before.
Actually, this does.
Where is Gremlins 3, actually? I never thought of that till now.
That's what I'd whisper.
It's a trilogy. Come on.
Actually, Joel, I think one thing that's probably worth mentioning.
We can't see it, Anthony. Can't see it.
What was Anthony on?
It's a bright light.
Yeah, we can't see it, Anthony.
See
it's
what?
Not showing. You're muted, Anthony. You're muted. You're muted, Anthony.
Listen, I'm a disgrace. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
It says Polish to English translation. Bozia is God. So my friend is always, he's constantly taking
words from the show
and just trying to find interesting translations.
Oh, that's a good one.
Actually, yeah, Anthony, you bring up a good. Oh, sorry, go on.
Let me just quickly say what Gorman is also. Garmin is a Russian accordion. I have no comment. Other than that some accordion tracks are pitched to an unsettling low in Mulholland Drive.
Mm-hmm.
Blah, 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 blah.
No, but somewhere right now, someone's writing a blog that's like, look, stretchy God means this. This is what Mark Frost meant by stretchy God, right?
Yeah.
Well, I looked up Cyril Pons, and so Pons is the thing in the brain that has to do with where dreams are formed. and Cyril translated to master. I mean, I was just fucking around, but I was like, when I was on Twitter, I tweeted at Mark Frost. I'm like, hey, Mark Frost, tell me I'm wrong. He didn't. But I liked it. I mean, you can find a lot of connections that, there's a French man, Frank Boulogeux. I don't know how you say his last name. He's an author, and he has done a lot of that kind of connecting in his blog posts about.
That guy gave me my break in Twin Peaks writing.
Oh, I love that. Who did you write that? Did you write that with Scott Ryan?
Scott Ryan and I both wrote
love that essay, Josh. It's one of my favorite essays. I love that essay. I forgot about that. I have to go back and read that again. I love that essay.
The whole theme of that essay was that the music is the only thing in Twin Peaks that doesn't lie. It's the only thing that doesn't lie. Even its absence doesn't lie, right? It still holds true. That was awesome. I loved writing that essay.
That was great. Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, that thing he did, I don't know. They put it up on YouTube. For any of you who might be interested, it was an online Twin Peaks conference, and it happened in 2018 or 19. Right? Yeah, and John Thorne presented. That was the first time I heard the theory about
the Avatar.
The Avatar. I was blown away. I mean, it was but it was 2 full days where they put a call out for papers, and I don't know how many people responded, but the people who presented, that work was just awesome. And it's all, not the whole thing isn't online, but a lot of those presentations are in those 2 days. The whole thing.
The art that Twin Peaks has reproduced, inspired. I mean, you think of like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. Of course, so many people have seen that, but they didn't have the technology that we have now to replicate it. They didn't have movies that, who knew that a trick of the human mind would see pictures moving at 28 frames a second and fill in the gaps and think that it's moving images. Like, imagine if Michelangelo would have had that back then. But I can't think of another art form modern that has inspired so many artists and thinkers, people of intellect and artistic expression, to be able to come and put their fingerprint on their reaction to this art is just, it's mind-blowing and it's overwhelming sometimes.
Now, Josh, do you think that there's any validity to my concept about having a panel this year at the festival that's titled Vince McMahon is a Lodge Denzian?
I'm watching that documentary right now.
Look, I think there's a good case to be made.
It's possible.
WWE's the Black Lodge. Listen. Lynch told you that he's never shown you the Black Lodge, right? Vince McMahon has never said that. I'm just saying.
Heather, I have started shaking my head from side to side in sync with what you must feel on a daily basis.
Yeah. When I do it, I do it a lot.
You hear him revving up. You know what I'm saying?
That's great.
I had a thought this morning driving to work, and I put it on Twitter for some stupid reason. But the thought was, out of all the Twin Peaks fans that you know, who would make the best character within Twin Peaks? And I got to say, Tommy, you're a contestant. You're definitely a contestant.
I'm not the contestant, buddy. I'm the contest, right?
But actually, that is a real question, just a random question. Does anybody pop to anyone's mind? All the
Scott Ryan.
Okay.
If Lucy had to retire and he was the new receptionist, that it would be like the most biting, trying to think what's the right word. Quips. Basically, he'd have like the most like biting quips like to anyone coming in. Didn't matter if you worked there, if you came in.
Yeah, except for Albert.
I just think he'd be good.
I feel like Scott and Albert are equal matches. Good.
But I think I derailed us there. But Colin, I cut you off earlier.
I recognize I'm my own shadow self, so I don't. That's fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, one day I'll ask you about all that. One day I'm going to ask you about your own demons, but not today.
They're all sitting here. They're all sitting here. It's fun. I'm open like that.
Yeah, I hear it. But Colin, I did cut you off before. I'm not sure if you remember what you were saying. I apologize.
No, actually, because when you mentioned Bozia being translated from Polish to English, and this is something I noticed with specifically Inland Empire and The Return, But I know why David Lynch is so fascinated with French culture, but it seems like in the last like 15, 20 plus years that Polish culture has been something that's like been actively on his mind. It's filmed, some parts are filmed in Inland Empire in Poland. The Polish poem is a song by Christabel that's probably featured in Inland Empire. There's the Polish accountant that we see in part 16. I mean, granted, with the return, it's a little to a tiny bit of a lesser extent, but I just never really knew what it was that Lynch like really gravitated to relative to Polish culture. I kind of want to ask if anyone else kind of heard anything or had any particular thoughts.
He was
Sorry,
invited to a Polish festival or film school or something in like the early 2000s. So that was what sparked it. But in terms of like what he saw there once he traveled there, I think you got that kind of, I think you got a mixture of the kind of like woodland folklore type atmosphere with also a lot of old industry, like abandoned industry. Like he did all these photos of abandoned factories and stuff there that kind of captures imagination. And I think that the actors in Inland Empire they were like somehow, I'd have to go back and look. I think it might be in Room to Dream, but I'm pretty sure it's also in or it's like it goes into more detail in the Beautiful Dark biography that was written years ago. Like what the kind of, what his how he got connected with Poland. But yeah, it was something like that.
That's actually hugely informative because I think of like how I
there
don't know
it
if it's
is.
a radical change.
We got an
but-
article in the chat.
Oh, very nice. I guess so.
Hey guys, we're gonna go ahead and take off. Before we do, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the years and years worth of entertainment. Josh, the years and years worth of emails that I'll get in my inbox this week alone.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
That was good meeting you.
Look forward to listening.
But
to
in
the
all
show.
sincerity, I really, really appreciate it. And in some strange way, it's a catalyst and a positive motivator to, finally come up with an angle of our own to do something. And that was the benchmark for me, was to have something that was unique enough to say, because I didn't want to retread your guys' material. But every one of you guys have been so positive. You're positive in your own materials about forwarding your thoughts, right? It's very much a theme about the community of content creators of Twin Peaks in general, that they're all extremely and overtly positive. Anthony's a friend of mine, and Anthony is the first person I reached out to in the community to say, hey, listen, I got an idea. I want to throw it past you. What do you think about this? He took time just to listen and hear me out. And I said, what do you think I got here? And he said, dude, just do it. Just do it. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about that. Do it. And it's been that way all throughout. Every single person that we've met, that we've come into contact with, that we watched on our television, that we read the books of, we read their blogs, we saw their appearances listed on podcasts, their podcast appearances. All of those folks have said, this is awesome. Do it. Do more of this. This is great. Right. So we really, really, really appreciate that.
It's great.
Actually, Tommy, I guess before we go, I was going to say, because I know I've actually seen people who've been on my show that have been critical, think they're not necessarily original thinkers, but a lot of them actually tend to be some of the more original ones. And for you and Heather, I don't think I've seen any other Twin Peaks fan where a lot of it is centralized back to Carrie Page. So I think you both actually have have really interesting theory stuff that I haven't thought about like in the years since I've gotten into Twin Peaks. So I do want to keep an eye out.
It's all going to go to hell. It's only one or the other.
Yeah, that's great.
Colin, did you do a Carrie Page episode yet? I'm trying to remember.
Ironically, I made a post today about how Carrie Page and Richard will probably be among my last characters I cover, because for the last at least for years since I started the podcast, I don't feel like I'm any closer. But I think you and me, when I was on your show, we actually talked about the parallels of Part 18 relative to Mulholland Drive. And I was thinking, and it might actually apply to Carrie Page, but I was thinking about Richard when he wakes up in a different motel, and how that paralleled Betty to Diane in Mulholland Drive, and how it's like that's the may or not be the quote unquote real world. And again, like I said, I never feel like I'm 100% comfortable talking about Part 18. Actually, I told Anthony this off the show, but I actually couldn't. I actually declined coming on the second last episode for this because I just didn't feel comfortable to articulate Richard and Carrie Page because there's just so much that's like hard to pull the thread for me that I feel like I can have like a real firm grasp to like really add to a conversation for.
Well, fortunately, Unrecorded Night will answer all our questions.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, some dark humor there.
That.
Yeah, already
I
has.
love that concept. I love the concept that you could overlay sort of the reveal of Carrie Page to the reveal of Mulholland Drive. I love that concept in general, right? And I've done a lot of thinking about that and the implication of the reveal, and that for me was the doorway into going like, well, this what we're seeing with Carrie Page here is a traditional reveal, absent the information of what she's being revealed as. But in other words, it is the big reveal, right? It's just that the central piece of information was revoked from you. And so perhaps you need to put it together that this was the dreamer, that it doesn't work that the horse is in her reality. It works that the horse from her reality is put into the personal unconscious.
But if you
right?
read about the individuation process in Carl Jung, it all makes sense.
Either that or we're blaming him. You know what I mean? It's one or the other. All right, guys, we gotta go.
Thanks so much.
Good night, you guys. Nice to meet you, Heather.
Tommy, thank you. Heather, especially.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. Cool.
And then there were 6.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I looked up Garmin on Google and I got a somewhat, maybe slightly misleading AI answer, but apparently it may be related to a Latin word or it may derive from a Latin word that means seed or bud. So you'd be saying seed of a god in some way. So that was interesting.
Yeah, my friend Joseph actually texted me that just 3 seconds ago, like as you started talking, Joel. he also said, and I'm going to read this.
This must be my doppelganger.
It could be. Could be. He's a huge fan of yours, by the way. He wrote, Jesus, I'm inclined to believe that the Bozia and God connection might be legit because, here, Colin, because a lot of the backward music that he has used is looped pieces from Penderecki's Polish Requiem. And then Lynch also has that short film called Pozor, which is Polish for fire. So there's just a little more Polish stuff your way. So to do whatever we wanted with.
And I'm Polish, part Polish.
But that just goes to show that even potentially, the language itself is serving as interesting items or symbolic, be it character names or whatnot. But I do want to ask Josh if there was any other particular items that he finds intriguing, because, well, my main, I just want Josh to go on a rant. I want him to just start and see where it goes. You know what I'm saying?
So my favorite icon of technology is the purple power station in part 3. I feel like that scene, for me, this is just how I read it. When NATO puts her hands on that machine and reverses a polarity there, I like to read that as a breaking of the fourth wall. And now the viewer is actually involved in the process of assimilating meaning from what's on screen. And I really, we're the only element that maintains meaning throughout the entire return. Like, we are the element that pulls it together. This right here, like us talking about it, is the only thing that produces meaning, because standing alone, it doesn't mean anything. So I love this idea that our love and our passion and our intention, our attention on what is there actually bleeds through the narrative. And I'm going to argue it happens in a few places. It would be the lights that flash on Anthony Sinclair's face that proves that he's a liar. That is our activity, actively watching it coming through in the narrative. The lights on the forms as he's making the latter impressions. That idea of we are active element inside of Twin Peaks: The Return. I'm not saying it was intended by the creators. I really don't care. I tend to only focus on what's on screen. I'm not really concerned with what's behind the camera. You guys are excellent at doing that. And I love to listen to you all talk about those things. But honestly, I'm interested in my reaction to the art and what it does to me. And I love this idea that I can be a part of this art. Every time I watch it, I feel like I'm a part of that. And I always think of it from the alien anthropologist. An alien craft lands here 1,000 years from now. They don't know who David Lynch is. They don't know Mark Frost. They don't know none of us. They've never read our books or listened to anything. But yet they can push play and they can watch this thing. And what does it mean? Like what does it mean? These things all have to interrelate to one another and tell a story. And for me, I love the idea that the viewer can always be a part of this story. Anytime I turn that on and I see those lights flash, I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm right here. I'm here right now inside of this piece of art, and I'm a part of it. I get to be a part of it. So to me, that's my most favorite thing about Twin Peaks: The Return is that ability that I can be a part of assimilating meaning from this thing, and then we can talk about it with one another. And I value your opinions as much as my own. It's wonderful.
Actually, Josh, since you mentioned the flashing lights and honing in on your own distinct interpretation, when you mentioned that, I was thinking of the use of flashing lights in Fire Walk with Me. The two scenes I'm thinking of are with the flashing lights when Laura sees Donna in the pink room, and then also when she has that kind of realization of the ring when she's in her bedroom. Do you think there's a connection between the flashing lights, what she sees, versus what we see in The Return?
I think there absolutely could be. I mean, light is obviously a huge element in all of Twin Peaks. I mean, I think we've already said that. The idea that there's lights on everywhere and electricity, all of that element of it. You know, I would say it's absolutely possible. And if you interpret it that way, it's valid.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. It's all connected. So says Tammy. Yeah.
Good.
But actually, it's getting a little past 10 o'clock, so this might be more of an Irish goodbye than an immediate exit. But I was gonna say I'm gonna kind of mosey on out in a little bit. But
Yeah, I'm winding down myself, but I gotta go hustle software tomorrow. Boo.
Boo.
I too shall have to depart.
Yes, it's that time. It's the witching hour.
Yeah.
It's dinner time here.
Yeah.
I'm going to just show you one thing that I was looking at. I prepared a couple images just in case.
Oh, this is cool.
And look at the Carrie Page house with the turned off lamp. So here we have one of our examples of light not being on for whatever that's worth. I did also, before Stephen left, I wanted to ask him if he had any costumey thoughts about this little clip in Mr. C or the Cooper Double's hair.
I need to find it.
I want it, Stephen.
Yeah.
I looked and looked and looked and looked. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's
I thought it was the Beastmaster ring with the eyeball in it. You remember that thing?
He might, but I don't. And then just, I didn't have time to finish.
Wow,
But
that's a good grid.
hey, Stephen I probably would know about this thing. And yeah, actually it's gonna take him. It's gonna take me to his thing. Does this ring a bell when you see Diamond County Sheriff's Badge?
Yeah, that's what they originally had on the original props, because it was supposed to be Diamond County, Twin Peaks was in Diamond County.
And should we think deeply about that, or is that just a thing?
I think they just changed it at some point. It is weird that it's the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department, because usually it's like, I think here in Central Florida, it's Orange County Sheriff's Department.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The Winter Garden Police, are the local police. So somewhere that got changed.
Do we know what Twin Peaks is? What county it's in? Has it ever been said?
It was, I think originally maybe in Diamond County.
Interesting.
Because they say normally,
which doesn't exist. Yeah.
Best in the tri-counties, so we have to figure that in, and you have the Red Diamond City Motel, so that could have been the next county over. I don't know, but Diamond County, and the original badges they had in the pilot, it had the Diamond County thing, but then that changed at some point, and that could have been ABC's direction.
So wild.
Why we had to add 5,000, the 50,000 or 5,000, kind of residents. Yeah, but early on that was Diamond County was something. And in the script, I think it appears Diamond County as well.
Oh, okay. And
That's cool.
because these are all the little details that I've never even noticed, thought of, considered. But I did look up Diamond County, and it's not a thing. It's not a place. So
It should be.
just like
That's a
Should
cool
be.
just like
It
Buckhorn.
is a cool
Yeah.
name. And we had a new young guy start at our office as a production assistant, and he came to work last week with an Issaquah sweatshirt. And I said to him, Issaquah? And he said, do you know Issaquah? And I was like, yeah, I do. He said, no one knows where Issaquah is.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. I always we actually have a few Twin Peaks people at our office, remarkably, and they're it's heartening to me because I'm one of the elder statespeople at the company I work for, and these are they're to me they're the kids, anybody under 30,
You and me both, sister.
Yeah, amen, brother. No doubt. Thanks for bringing us together always, Anthony. This is so
buddy.
awesome. This is
Yeah,
really
my
good.
pleasure.
Love
I,
this
I
group.
appreciate I appreciate people taking the time, and especially because you're people that I wanted to talk with, and I thought you'd enjoy seeing each other.
We
I
do.
think many of you for the th time, whatever. And but I do appreciate, because we all have lives to live, and we all have stuff going on, and this isn't a highly paid gig or anything, but I think it's just fun. How many times do you get to just talk about your favorite thing with with a whole big group of people? So
Scott Ryan always said, if you want to go broke, write about Twin Peaks.
there you go. It's a good quote.
But yeah, no, it's for me. It's like I was out of the loop of recording for the last couple months. So it was like a huge deal to finally come up, just catch up with everyone. Because actually, Joel, I haven't seen you in person, but a lot of everyone else I haven't seen since like Twin Peaks Day or a David Lynch event. But no, that's always the thing, is that because like for me, I think one of the reasons why I get along with people like John Bernardi and Maya McBride so well is that I think for one reason or another, we kind of had Twin Peaks as like kind of on our own island for a while. So we just kind of like festered with it, for lack of a better term. But when you get to see people, there's like this like new surge of energy of like, oh, like, how is everything? Or what do you think of this? So, it'd be on a group with like, 6, actually including Tommy and Heather, 8 people. No, it's really special whenever I can be on your show.
Totally.
Well said. Well said.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyways,
much appreciated.
I gotta do some grocery shopping before they close the night. So I
buddy.
hope you all have a good rest of your night.
Yeah.
Get that corn. Get that cream corn.
Get that
buddy.
cream corn, Colin.
I can spare the 50 cents, so I think I'll get
That's
some
better.
back.
Friends.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, take
Yeah,
care,
thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right,
All right,
we'll see you again
Okay.
soon. Ciao.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye,
I
Steve.
think it's gonna be me and Joel. Stephen, man,
Gotta
thank
make
you.
up. Gotta make up for lost time.
Yeah, this always happens. That was cool. That was cool. You want to do a speed round?
Yeah. Oh,
For
sure.
all time's
Yeah.
sake?
Go for it.
You and I are the originators of the speed round game, I think, which just happened impromptu one day. So I'm gonna do a visual speed round, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And take your pick. Same theme for this episode. Same theme. Items that are possibly
Objects. Yeah.
items,
about-
objects, symbols that are potentially simply just fun. Or
How about Otis over there and his jar of pickles and all that stuff on there?
Yeah, I don't know if that's pickles. I don't know what the heck that is. I think it's some sort of like, I don't know, meat of some sort. I'm not even sure. Okay, so riff on Otis.
Riff on Otis. Ooh. I wonder what his role in like the whole Mr. C operation is, because it's like I almost felt like when Mr. C came in there, it was like one of those situations where like Mr. C works for him, but obviously at this point, the master has surpassed or the student has surpassed the master kind of thing. It's like maybe back in the day he got involved with some sort of a criminal network that this guy was running, and then it's just like, well, Superman's here, so you kind of take a back seat to him now. I don't know, but the whole thing of him having a guy outside who Cooper knocks out, there's like an unspoken sense in the scene, even though everyone's very cordial with each other, of like, fuck, we thought we could keep this guy out of here, he's back.
Yeah,
Give him
yeah.
what he wants. I don't know.
That's
Sorry, that's not
a very
an
good point.
That's not an object discussion though, but
No, but that's okay. That's he himself is an object or possibly,
that's true.
significant or
Every
symbolic in
person
some
in a
way.
Lynch film is.
It's true. And you never know when the person is actually, to some extent a representative of of an idea or some concept or something. You know, Otis also gives us the nickname Mr. C
That's right.
that seems to have caught on.
He's
And
the
he says it
only one
twice
who
too.
says it, right? And
Yeah, and I
nobody
think
else
he
says
says
it
it
in the whole
twice,
show.
right? Mr. C, Mr. C. And he says it so that guy is what a badass. But aside from just contributing to the vibe of the scene and of course giving us some visual props to look at, he's the one who coins the term Mr. C, which I believe David Lynch himself doesn't use that. I think he has called that character Cooper's double or Cooper
Yeah,
double,
that sounds
which
right.
is
I think double.
which is maybe nothing, maybe interesting because I always thought of Mr. C as like an aspect or an element of like
Yeah.
the original Cooper, but double implies some sort of separate entity, as opposed to maybe like the John Thorne's take, which is maybe like a third, one third or one half, the bad side.
Yeah, I always go back to it, but I love the John Thorne theory, and I feel like it's
Hmm.
been to the extent anything can be disproven in Twin Peaks, I feel like it was kind of disproven. But it's honestly like one of my favorite theories of his. So it's kind of a little bit of a bummer in a way. I don't know.
What in what sense
I like the
disproven?
idea of
Bec-
like looking at different facets of some central character or person or event or whatever. I like the idea of there being a
yeah.
core. I think I like the idea of there being a core to something. And if there's like a
Hmm.
core Cooper and then we're getting these like splinters of him, I kind of like that more. Plus, I also think if Mr. C is just like it's honestly a little bit hard for me to glean Mr. C's relationship to Cooper. Like, in other words, I love these little hints we get that, hey, like, he's kind of a detective like Cooper. Like, his whole
Hmm.
quest is something a little Cooper. Like, I love those, but we don't get all that much of it. And some of it feels like it's the viewers kind of wish casting it a little bit. Like, I don't know. I've never quite been able to come up with a satisfactory um grasp on like the significance of the whole Mr. C storyline, honestly. It's like to a certain extent I see it as a little bit of a shaggy dog like, hey, we came up with this thing on the spur of
Hmm.
the moment at the end of season 2. Obviously, we have to return to this. And yet I watch it and at least for Lynch, I feel like and honestly for Frost too, like their central interest in the story is elsewhere. They got to do this thing, so they do it. And I love a lot of the Mr. C scenes. Um, there's some great stuff in it. It's the plot engine, really, that gives the return a kind of direction. But it feels for Lynch like it's almost like the first 17 episodes are in terms of plot, not in terms of incident, because I think the whole show is just scattered with incidents that he wanted to depict.
Okay.
Little
Hmm.
ideas he had that maybe had nothing to do with Twin Peaks, and he shoehorned them in. But in terms of like constructing a narrative, it almost feels like he uses the return as like a clothesline for all these different ideas. And then in the final episode, he's like, oh, here's the narrative I actually want to tell of the like, Diane, Cooper, Carrie, all of that. And then it kind of ends right as he's getting going. Kind of
That's interesting.
a funny quirk of it to me.
Yeah, or maybe the sense that hang all these clothes on the line and the trust that it's going to come together in some way.
Well, I mean, I
Um,
think John Thorne's kind of his use of Mulholland Drive, I think, for a lot of his theories as like the organizing principle. Like,
mhm.
hey, this film where Lynch was making something, he didn't know where it was going to go. He then had to find a way to tie it all together, and he did it through this. I think that forms like the basis of so many of his theories going forward and so many of his readings. So it's kind of awesome that he came full circle with this book on Mulholland Drive, which I just ordered yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, and it's good. You're going to enjoy
Oh,
it.
I can't wait. I
Because
found yeah, sorry.
because what you just said, literally because of what you just said,
Yeah.
as like the Mulholland Drive is sort of like a central way of viewing his work at large. You'll feel that way even stronger after reading the book, I
And
think.
I think
And
that and
that it was the
also
and I'm just
yeah,
talking
keep going.
slowly.
No, keep
And that
going.
it was the result of, that it was the result of problem solving. And one of my
Yep.
favorite things about Lynch and how John talks about Lynch is just the creative problem solving. It's just
Yep.
it's so cool, you know.
That is so
You
yeah, I think for me, the two kind of central uh, writers about Lynch and Twin Peaks that most kind of shaped my ideas, even though there was a lot of different things, like little pieces here and there, but the two core ones were John Thorne and Martha Nachemson.
Mhm.
And I think for John, it's funny, it's like if I actually go theory by theory, I don't usually agree with his conclusions. It's like, okay, you go in that direction. I would maybe go a little
Mhm.
here. But his starting points are like revelatory for me. Like I never really thought about the train car scene and the ring, and it was just kind of a collage of
Mhm.
images until I read his piece about Laura Palmer and his
Yeah.
reading of it, which I end up having a somewhat different interpretation, although there's some similarities as well. But he's the one who opened that door for me. And it is exactly as he said. It's that idea of Lynch as a creative problem solver, because I think so much discourse around Lynch focuses understandably on him kind of defying conventions and structures and
Yeah.
narratives and all of that. And I get that, but there's something really refreshing about John's ability to kind of just pierce that a bit and say, he's working in time, he's working with characters, he's
Yeah.
working in essentially narrative forms, and he's doing something with that. Like he is using those tools of the trade to like articulate things that normally I think might not find representation in narrative media, if that makes sense.
That makes
Um,
pitch perfect sense.
and I think
Yeah.
Mulholland
And
Drive is the clearest example of him doing that. So it makes sense that that's kind of the lodestar. I think to a certain extent for me, because it was the breakthrough Lynch film for me where
hmm.
I saw that and that opened the door. I'd seen Elephant Man as a kid, but Mulholland Drive was the one. I almost expected the other films to be like that. I remember I saw Blue Velvet next and I was a little
Hmm.
bummed out. I'm like, oh, like there's nothing to figure out exactly here. It's not like there isn't like this emotional puzzle to piece together like there is with Mulholland Drive, where you like wake up from a dream and you go, "Oh my God, what? Oh, this was the significance of that, and this was that." I actually had a similar sensation watching Vertigo and then Rear Window, which I
Hmm.
love Blue
Yeah.
Velvet. I really love Rear Window, but first viewings were disappointments because I'm like, "Oh my God, Vertigo halfway through." I don't know. I have no idea where this is going.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it went
I
here.
had
I
the same
never expected
experience.
that. And then I watch Rear Window and I'm like, well, the guy killed his wife, but what's the twist going to be? And it's like, oh, that's not what it was about. And it's not.
Yep.
It's a masterpiece. It's not doing what Vertigo's doing. But
Yep.
those have always been like my favorites of like Hitchcock or Lynch is the films where they do that as well as all the other stuff they do. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. That actually. Yeah. Totally. That actually.
that was not a lightning round right there.
I was just thinking that too. Speed round, 15 seconds.
That was about 15 minutes.
let me
Actually,
let me
I got a
go
question for you
ahead.
if I
Yeah.
can further detour a little bit.
Sure.
Remind me, so when you came into Twin Peaks, what was your
Mhm.
experience with Lynch at that point? I'm sure we've had this discussion before, but just I guess remind me of that.
Okay, I'm not even going to play this off. I was going to play this off with a smooth edit, but but I just paused after your question and had a total Dougie Jones first pee in 25 years moment. So I'm in heaven right now. I don't know if I had any experience with Lynch before Twin Peaks, quite frankly. I'd heard of the Elephant Man. Um, I'd heard of Lynch, had seen pictures and thought he was super cool looking with great hair. And I vaguely knew that he was, like a surrealist type filmmaker. But I don't think I hadn't seen any of his films except maybe Dune, possibly like deep in the recesses of my like childhood memory.
Mm.
But I don't remember Twin Peaks as a reference. And, I was in eighth, ninth grade at that time. I don't even
Oh yeah,
remember it as a
interesting.
reference, as a thing.
Hmm.
So
When did you become aware of it?
when I started watching it, so that was like September 2020, and I don't even know
What?
how that happened.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what brought it to your attention?
I was teaching from home. It was like during COVID. So and that was the very infancy of that. So I was like, we weren't even really allowed to teach. We had to just like assign kids easy work, and then and then check on their progress. So I had way more time and and a computer to sit in front of. And I think I borrowed somebody's Netflix password or something, and that's how I found it. But then once I started watching it, I do remember saying, why did it take so long? Oh, so this is what the hype was all about, et cetera, et cetera.
So you'd
And
heard the name, but it was just a thing, like
yeah, so I guess I had a
pop
reference of it
culture. Yeah.
somewhere. But yeah, like all the memes that you see and whatnot, and the
Yeah.
iconic, the usual stuff, that wasn't even on my radar. And then, I'm an English teacher, so I obviously, at least somewhat, I like books and literature and reading and things like that, and lightly some art. But I guess just the world of art in some way, definitely the world of film. And I've told you this personally, with great help from you, like that opened itself up to me. And Twin Peaks was definitely the catalyst towards just getting interested in that sort of stuff.
So when you finished season 2, because that's what was
Mhm.
on Netflix, right? It was just the first 2 seasons. Like what was you just kind of aware there was a film in another season, or like how did you maybe
Yeah,
because I don't remember, maybe we didn't have this. I thought we had it on this conversation on
yeah,
my episode where I had you on, but now I'm wondering, I feel like maybe we didn't.
yeah.
So
I'm not sure how
well,
far into it
remind
we
me.
went, but yeah, seriously. I went to the library once I found out that there was more, and I think I finished season two. Literally got in my car, drove to the local library, came back and started.
Nice.
So I didn't have that 25-year wait,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was looking things up online, and oh god, get ready. Um, one second, TJ. Yeah, so totally lost my train of thought.
Well,
My
back
fault.
in.
My fault.
Came back for seconds.
After such an emotional exit, I thought, man, I better not destroy that. Then I thought, nah.
We're
So
going down the history of Anthony's Twin Peaks and Lynch journey.
yeah,
Oh man, I had to miss that.
I was looking at some stuff online, without trying to spoil anything, Joel.
Mhm.
And I learned all the stuff that was out there, and I looked for some advice without any spoilers. And basically, the advice was to take it in order.
Mhm.
So, then I went from season one to the film, which I watched where I'm sitting now. I might have told you this before. And where I'm sitting now it's a shed that I have outdoors that we kind of insulated, turned into like a makeshift office. And I live in a woodsy area. I live in a
Mhm.
rural area, and it's friggin' scary over here. So, and I was hearing things tapping on the glass when I was watching that film. And that film, I was just scared the whole
Yeah.
time. and it's a terrifying movie in a lot of ways. But I also didn't like it in a lot of ways. I
Which
I
film is
found the
this?
characters Fire Walk with Me. When I first watched it, I thought the characters were pretty annoying because I've worked in restaurants and bars like for a lot of my life, and intoxicated people like just I kind of had my fill.
There's a lot of them in
You know
that
what I'm
movie.
saying? And I'm like, all right, yeah, I get it. I don't care. And then, as I took in the whole collective, narrative and whatnot, I've come back to that film, watched it 5 or 6 more times. I think it's like a masterpiece, whatever that word means. I think it's absolutely incredible. But yeah, just I don't know. I think Twin Peaks. I think it's an anti-drug show amongst many other things.
There were critics who called it in '92. They're like, "This is just a glorified after-school special" or something like that.
Yeah. But to go back to the speed round, we were trying to do 30-second questions, Tommy, and the first
we got way
the
away
first
from
question
that.
took about 18 minutes. But I'm going to give you a question that my friend asks me a lot, and that is, where does Mr. C or the Cooper double character, like, where does he come from? Where do you guys think he comes from? His
You want to
origin.
take that first, Tommy?
Sure. Mr. C is the Mr. C is the archetype in its current iteration of what a bad guy is, with his leather jacket and his disposition, and his superhero strength at some points. Just as Cooper is an archetype first of a buddy cop in the 80s and then becomes an archetype of the FBI agent with his broken relationship and his brooding demeanor and his fighting prowess later on. So they're two sides of a very similar coin. They're meant to be archetypal on purpose. If Cooper is the defense mechanism, which I believe that he is, then Mr. C represents repression. So where does he come from? From your deepest shadows, right? He's the shadow self of your own personal defense mechanism. Your defense mechanism would look something like that, right? The representative of whatever's currently accepted as a agent, law enforcement officer, superhero, ninja, whatever the case might be, right? That would be your defense mechanism.
Defense against what? I'm sorry.
Well, so
I don't know exactly how this stuff works. So just like, what does that
like
mean,
your defense mechanism, right? When when something polarizing happens, look, it could be as small as when something polarizing happens, your defense mechanism against that, your overreaction, or if something traumatic and tremendous happens, your shock. The defense in that case is like, shut this down. Don't let this happen. That's why I think, look, and here we go with another 30 seconds that became 20 minutes. That's why I think that's why Cooper acts so incorrectly with the notion that the man from another place tries to hand Lord of the Ring, and he's like, whoa, don't take the ring. Because his notion is, I don't know about this. I don't know if this is going to be good for you. So if I don't know it's going to be good for you, then it's bad for you. And my job is to protect you. That's all my job boils down to. Right. That's what I mean by defense mechanism. But it's a complex. It's a complex that lives in your mind. Right. And it's not just a Jungian complex, but we've identified defense mechanism to be what it is. That when we accuse somebody of having a defense mechanism, we're accusing them of protecting their own persona and ego. Right. And a lot of times we mean it in a derogatory sense, but regardless of that, like you have it because it's necessary. It's an evolutionary byproduct of you being around. But Mr. C directly comes from the opposite and opposing sides of that. I think that it's a pure reflection of a shadow, right? Because your shadow is not pure bad, like you're not pure good, right? But that's a pure reflection of a shadow. So it almost lives to be the archetype of the shadow. It's like we had archetype cards and we handed them out. And we're going, this is the hero, this is the fool, this is the wise old man, this is the shadow. Mr. C's that. He's like a pure unbridled version of the shadow. That's the interpretation I get, So when I play my Jung greatest hits over the top of the information, like that's what I see when I get to going like, hey, let's talk about Jung's 12 archetypal personalities that live inside your brain. That's what I would say that Mr. C is. Die in the wool, the worst parts of you shadow. Like you've got one, whatever your persona is that's running around in your imagination, the shadow version of that is the essence of your pure wrongness, right? And that's what Mr. C is. And he comes directly from the Black Lodge.
I had a thought this morning that the question, who is the dreamer, might just be like a playful red herring in the show. I don't think that's the case, but
you're like, what if this is the ultimate swerve? They're just like, this will throw them.
Yeah, no, and I don't think I don't think it's a show that plays games on the audience.
No.
So I didn't mean it in that sense, but like I don't know. I don't know if the whole thing is dreamed up or
it's
even
like
parts of it
Lynch's
are
Glass
dreamed up.
Onion. You know what I mean? It's like the Beatles Glass Onion. Like we're just gonna throw this out here. This is the equivalent of watching a guy sweep a floor for 2.5 minutes, right? Like we'll just say this, and maybe this will consume 9 years of your life.
But the idea that it is, that it is existing in somebody or multiple people's heads does allow the dream logic-y type stuff to work. And that's another term I don't know too well, but my understanding of dream logic is basically something that like perception that is not constrained by cause and effect or physics or things like that. So
I think
right. Well,
you could almost yeah.
You go
draw
ahead,
that back to Freud, man. You know what I mean? Like, and what's interesting, of course, like in my deep dive because look, I'm on about the fact Mark Frost, he's very adamant about what he means to the lore, right? And especially these days, he's becoming pretty vocal about where he stands with the lore, right? Because he has spent the vast majority of his career not exactly getting the credit that he deserves. And so he's starting to be fairly vocal about that. But his subscription to Jungian psychology is like it's not like a guy who goes, "Hey, I'm into Rogers." It's like when you subscribe to Jungian psychology, that's to say that everything that informs your opinion is about the hero myth, about the myth inside of you. Everything. You think that has to do with evolution, it's what perpetuated evolution. So when you talk about dream logic, you talk about like this split between Jung and Freud, and they were friends, and he was in some ways a student of his. But Freud is like, look, your subconscious is a place where you just stick repression and that's it. Like that you just stick this bad stuff in there. And sometimes you dream it and, and it can mean what it means. And here's an interpretation of that. Jung's like, dude, that's embedded in you from the ground up. That's the essence of the fabric of mankind. And so Jung is like, he's very much going like, no, none of it makes any sense to some degree, but it's all symbols for you to decipher. Absolutely. And those symbols existed in some hereditary way, like deeply into the generations of your family, right? It's a very mystical line of thinking for psychology, man.
Have you guys seen A Dangerous Method?
Not that I know of. No, what's that?
Recommend it highly. It's a David Cronenberg film about Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, and the woman, Sabrina Spielren. I can't remember her name, but she's kind of in a way the main character. She was a patient that Jung had, and then he had an affair with her, as he did with many of his patients, and he kind of took her case to Freud, who was his mentor at the time, or was becoming his mentor, and she became a kind of a disciple of Freud. I think I have the chronology right of how all this worked, and there's this weird triangle between the three of them, and it's all a true story. It's a fascinating lens into the split between Freud and Jung.
Let me ask you a question, man. Is the lady in question, is that the lady that he sort of bases the concept of synchronicity on?
I don't think so, but let me double check.
Okay. All right. Because there's a pivotal instance with the patient of his where he goes on to coin this term and entire philosophy of synchronicity. If you know Jung, like he's a prolific writer. When he coins a phrase, he does it to the tune of 10 books, right? So like, but synchronicity is like all over the place in Twin Peaks. And my podcast will shift into that thing, and then we'll be there for months. But
no, I don't. So I just double checked. I don't think that was her, but she actually became then a psychiatrist in her own right and ended up in the Soviet Union. And then she was killed in World War II by the Nazis. And so like there's this film is like, about the kind of relationship between the three of them and how that manifests. But if you check that out, which I mean, being into Jung, I would definitely recommend you check that out. Also check out the book it's based on, because the book has obviously way more detail and there's more of like a straight nonfiction.
100%, dude.
And there's like a play too. Like I went down this rabbit hole when the film came out. I think it was like 2011, 2012. I went down this whole rabbit hole, and it's so interesting. Because like with Jung, he's somebody I have not like studied his work yet the way I should for the extent to which he fascinates me. But like I read his autobiography and loved it, and I read this stuff and loved it. So it's like weirdly like my approach so far to Jung has been totally biographical. Like I haven't studied his work all that much, but his life like fascinates me.
I think that's great. Look, I mean, for me, and of course I would say this because here's what I'm on about right now, and here's where the position of my podcast. I took about a year to look things over before I launched the podcast because I wanted to know that it had legs. With that said, the theory is still a work in progress. That's sort of like the hook of my show, that the theory is still ongoing and I'm still building. That's sort of the hook of Dreamer's Diary. But I'm not a Jungian, not in any sense of the term, right? But the way that I've fallen in to having to try to unscramble that information was directly from Mark Frost's multiple mentions of Jung. I mean, it's strange how often he's evoked Jung in conversations about the lore of Twin Peaks, right? In the same way that he'll do the same thing with Theosophy. But if you really notice what he's doing, he kind of goes, well, here's the myth that I'm using, and here's the psychology behind why we use myths. There you go. Like that's all. He kind of continues to call out to that. And so, man, as soon as you fall down the Jungian rabbit hole, you can just lay quote after definition after chapter just completely on top of it, right? It gotta be something going on with Mark Frost wanting to actually tackle what a personal unconscious would look like. But man, I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention, because I'm by no means like, I'm not. There is a Jungian community, and there of strong folks, and I'm not that, right? Like this is, I have to choose what it is that I'm going after in terms of the show and content, and then I have to devote my focus and research to that angle through that lens to see if it tracks with what Frost and Lynch has done. And a lot of times it doesn't track, right? What you got, Anthony?
When it doesn't track, what do you do?
I'm honest with myself. So there are some things I've got to put to the side because there's no business talking about them. I've said this before on another show that we were doing, where I said, look, there's a lot that's going on with the soap opera aspects of the show, with the Martell. There's a lot that's going on that I don't recognize that from Jungian literature, and I'm not exactly positive other than the fact of some things are just archetypal of a soap opera. And since we're using a personal conscious drama in the form of what was popular of its time, which was a soap opera, which Jung would suggest that's what you would do, right? Then you would obviously have elements of a soap opera inside of that drama. But there's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah,
but to answer your question directly, sometimes, I mean, I hit a wall, dude, so I got to put it away, focus on other things.
It's skeptics would say, and I don't really know a lot about Jung or even Jung as a lens or a framework, but skeptics would say that generically speaking or generally speaking, when somebody wants to apply like a Jungian lens, that by its very nature allows the interpretation to be really pliable. Like you could stretch the text to fit that lens because that's what a Jungian lens does. And I don't know if that's good, bad, or otherwise, but I will use that as a transition to this picture that that Joel knows I had on my screen a couple times earlier tonight, just because I think it's cool that Nido's face has the red room floor within it. And there's just a moment when that happens. And I'm looking at this not so much to focus on the Cooper face, which is always gets all the attention. But do you have any thoughts on why she's got chevron?
Yeah,
I guess the top half of her face is the red curtains, I guess, So she's got the red room inside her head.
Yeah, compositionally, it's an interesting image because he doesn't have her face just superimposed against the background. It's like top half of the image is the curtain, bottom half is the chevron, and then top half of her face, which is in the top half of the image, is half chevron, half curtain. So it's like it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's not like perfectly, you know what I'm trying to say here. Basically, he could have had her nose be right where the curtain is, background. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah. And it's so much better this way.
Yeah, no, it's much cooler. It looks like she's wearing a mask or something. Like it's a weird. It is definitely. There's a lot of like weird foreshadowing of COVID and Twin Peaks. And The Return. I have to say, it's like I've had fun with that. And the idea that like part 18 is like maybe set in 2020. And that's
I remember you saying
inside.
that. Do you know why? Know why? And here perhaps we'll give Tommy a chance to test out, some of maybe the uncertainties in his theory. But do either of you know why her face has the red room in it, or or vice versa, or the red room has her face in it?
I do have a thought about that, which is it's not even so much about Nato, but once she becomes Diane, and actually not even in this episode, in the subsequent episode, Diane is dressed like the Red Room.
Yeah.
She got like red and black, and I think like the nails are even black and white or something like that. And she got the red hair, just like the curtains. Like they really make her, and actually in this scene, she does have that wig. So
and then earlier when they're at the hotel, she somehow appears. She appears through these red curtains, almost like magically, like those curtains wouldn't be in that room.
Yeah, and it's funny, tied. Like her tulpa doesn't have, other than that one scene, but like wardrobe wise, she's not as tied to the Red Room as like the Diane and Part 18 is. But I kind of feel like Diane she's fascinating to me because she's so many different things at once, which like Lynch at his best is so good at making multiple things at once and making you see the complementary, aspects of that. So like, to me, I go back to Martha Nachemson, where she talks about the Red Room as the space where Cooper is more in touch with his intuition, at least the first time he goes there. It's like he is like submerging himself into his own subconscious and getting in touch with the part of him that understands things intuitively. And I think she very astutely points out the kind of gendered way that this is that this unfolds in Twin Peaks, where that is kind of coded in a way as feminine. And then his subsequent trip to the Red Room in the the season 2 finale, he's like the classic masculine hero trying to find his, trying to rescue the damsel in distress and find his way. And she feels like he's gone in, as the little man says when he points to him, wrong way. You've gone in the wrong way. Like the wrong way is in his head. And that's the moment where he becomes, he's taken over or he switches place with the doppelganger or whatever. And so with all of that in mind, I think it's just super interesting to me. Diane, obviously a female character who in some way is like, and here we go back to Jung, she's kind of like Cooper's anima, and That's one
Hmm.
of the things she is. She's other things too. She's kind of an independent character in a way. She's almost like his prisoner. He holds her. It's like, and she's also, I will say, her costume doesn't just echo the Red Room, it echoes the tape recorder. And I'm not the one who caught that. Somebody else pointed that out, and I just thought, like, wow, that's so true. Like the red, the black, the white of that little tape, and the which of course also Japanese tape recorder, Japanese actress playing her mask in The Return. So there's like all these fascinating things that character is in relation to Cooper, and also separate from him in ways that just like feed off of each other. So sorry, that's my 15-second answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you talked about it in relation to Cooper as well, because previously we were talking about the Cooper double or the Mr. C character. And I wanted to feed it to Tommy because he was talking about Mr. C in relation to Cooper and then Cooper in relation to Carrie, presumably.
Yep.
So is there a pathway from Carrie to Cooper to Diane to more specifically this face? Forget the
yeah.
Cooper face, forget the Cooper overlaid face for a moment. The Red Room itself within
Actually,
her face.
I think that's interconnected purposefully. So try this out, Joel. This is a wildly different take from what you just mentioned. So if
Let's do it. Yeah, all right. That was just another quick break. Tommy, I was asking you if you saw any connection, you could say it from Carrie to Cooper to Diane to that particular Red Room within her face or vice versa. Take it from there.
okay. So with what Joel was just talking about, look, I was just mentioning this not just a couple of days ago on the show. For us, the like Twin Peaks super obsessive, we a long time ago adopted to a brand new central mystery. The mystery for us, it doesn't have much to do with Laura Palmer. We know the answers to that somewhat, right? But it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with what happened. It has to do with a broader question, like what is the nature of this show? And is what we see all that there is to see, or is there an external life outside the presence of this show? Now, the reason that I start there is because when people go down that rabbit hole, traditionally speaking, they come up with two different answers as to what this show is about, and it boils down to two different people, and it's either the cognitive dissonance or fugue of Agent Cooper or of Laura Palmer, and both of those are like totally legitimate to come up with. Of course, you would go to those directions. And so then it becomes questions about, well, when did this cognitive fugue start? Has anything that we've ever seen in Twin Peaks been real? What instances are actually occurring? What's only symbiogy? Right? It becomes that. Like, what myth am I looking at? Those have become our major questions. So for me, when I say that Carrie Page is the dreamer, there are all of these instances throughout the property where it shows you reflections of oneself to try to tie together the concept of individuation. This is good. The tying together of synchronicity is good, right? Events that mimic one another is good. Shadows are bad, but traditionally speaking, when you're seeing reflections of other things, so if we say, okay, well, Diane, here's a person that's reflecting the behaviors of the true conscious form of the Black Lodge. Well, that tends to be a good thing. But what I think is even more important is, first of all, we have Cooper, who is looking through the prism now of this television show, right? And I feel like this is sort of the end of the television show. It's the recognition that this is other than. We live inside a dream. Am I there?
Yes, but that was well timed. Go ahead.
Holy moly. Yeah, you would have thought I meant to do that. Anyway, so Carrie is projecting this concept, wait for it, of Kyle MacLachlan, who is sitting in a perpetual state of withholding. He's held because the repression does not want him to actually escape the Black Lodge because he's playing the defense mechanism in this drama. And they have convinced him that he's actually part of the drama until he recognizes, I'm not part of that drama right now. I'm still being held in the Red Room, right? And then she evokes the one thing that would sort of snap him out of that, right? Laura Dern. It's almost as if the Dreamer's a David Lynch fan. I know, that's total crazy talk, but I actually believe that that's true. I believe that the Dreamer's a David Lynch fan. I think that it explains Cooper's otherwise weird for Cooper behavior when he finally comes out of the Red Room in the curtain call, right? Addressing these two as actors, right? And there's no mention of Annie. There's no mention of this person that he's been making out with in the Red Room all this time, right? It's none of that. It's exactly what you would think those two characters from Blue Velvet would do instantaneously if they saw one another, right? There's this element of romance that occurs, and you can't justify it. There's no hint of a romance between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the reflection itself of her as the essence of the lodge, or the essence of the consciousness, right? That has to do with the fact that anything that's going to lead Cooper to pushing this story toward her actual consciousness, not subconsciousness, that's a good thing, right? And so he reflects his awareness of the idea that this is all pretend. This TV show is a pretend thing. This has to go away. Right? Whether or not he realizes that he's part of he's a complex and he's part of the subconscious, that's hard for me to ascertain as of yet. But I do know that he knows this is fake and it has to stop. And we have to move on now. Right? That my directive from the firemen is starting, and this has to stop. This has been a deflection and it has to end. I think that Twin Peaks: The Return was a deflective tactic for the defense mechanism to avoid individuation, right?
Yeah,
does that answer?
Can I'll jump in here because there's a couple things I wanted to say for that. Like, one is it's funny because while you were gone, Anthony and I were talking, and we talked about the idea that like almost the first 17 parts of The Return are this weird, like, they were almost like a warm up for Lynch to get what he wants to get to, which is part 18. It's like, I got to deal with all this. We left off season 2 with the doppelganger. So here's a plot mechanism with the doppelganger, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Done with that. Now here we go.
Yeah.
And it gets that. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of rhymes with that idea.
Well, remember when we all saw we remember what it was to see the finale and then see the ricochet through the community where so many people went, you know what? That was the real world. Cooper went to the real world, right? And that was sort of the first instantaneous reaction. It was the most knee-jerk reaction that some folks in the community had. Now, I don't believe that, but I can totally see where, because it's a truer sense of a person's consciousness, still the subconsciousness, but a truer reflection of it. I can see where people would have been confused by that. And I bring that up because, just like you're talking about, well, what is everything else? Everything else is a television show. This other thing wasn't necessarily a television show. It's more like a dream, right? It's more like, when you dream, oftentimes you'll dream in your house. It just so happens that when you turn the corner, you live in a Kmart or a Walmart or whatever, right? Because it's a dream logic, right? This other thing is more like a television show, a hyper real, hyper acted television show, and then suddenly it's not. Suddenly, I still maintain that it's a fake level of consciousness that the dreamer doesn't fully, they're not fully in control of, because Cooper demonstrates this superhuman intuition that he's always had, right? To navigate himself directly to Carrie Page's house, right? So that to me doesn't strike me as the real world. That for me was the smoking gun to go, nah, this ain't the real world, but it's definitely comprised of real world elements, right?
Well, also, they basically just drive from Texas to Twin Peaks nonstop, and it's night all the time. Like,
right.
So there's some weird stuff going on there. Yeah.
There's definitely elements that are impossible, but it's like
it's not impossible because that's what editing is. And
sure, maybe we're only seeing the last hour.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a good answer, but that also reminds me of when Cooper and Diane are in the hotel, and then he wakes up and there's a letter, and and it's a different hotel and a different car. That could be editing too. I mean, I've said that before. That's something my friend Joseph pointed out. Like, just because those scenes are side by side, it doesn't mean they're contiguous in time. So
I
I
understand
don't
what
know if there's any great meaning there, but that's just interesting to remember that two things could be edited side by side, but not necessarily take place that way.
I have an interesting idea about that too, man. I mean, just real quick, that the entire purpose behind Richard and Linda and then the dissolvement of them instantaneously, right? Before you've even got a chance to see what that relationship is comprised of, it's ending. And what's the purpose of that? And it's like, well, man, in 2017, if you take a good look around at all the FBI dramas, all the cop show dramas, from things like The Wire to True Detective and all the way back around, they're all in fractured relationships. That's a reflection of the modern day FBI agent story. They start the show by going, here's this guy. He's kind of an alcoholic. He's a great detective. He's got a bad relationship with his wife. She's probably leaving him. Let's go. Right? Like, it's all, so again, it's like a brand new reflection of the soap opera in today's modern landscape, which now, we call the television show, the event series, the whatever. Right?
Yeah, I could see how you could make that fit. The thing about your idea, Tommy, that I still find compelling is even when I don't understand a lot of the deeper concepts, what I find compelling is waiting until the absolute end of the entire series, knowing that this is going to be the ending, with a possibility of a season 4, but knowing that this is meant to be the ending, and that there's a lot of dreamy stuff happening. Just just saving the dreamer character for like the last 15 minutes is just, it makes sense.
I mean,
I'm not saying that's the case at all, but that's the part, that's the simplest, not deepest, basic Occam's razor type thing about your theory that makes
you want to know why? Yeah,
because
the easiest thing about my theory is I just looked at it and I go, I don't why carry page? Why? I don't understand why, unless you're revealing that that's the dreamer. Other than that, I'm like, this is unnecessary. You're telling me Judy. So wait a minute.
Or it's just another beautiful new question to ask that's going to remain unanswered.
Yeah.
Because,
well, if we believe, if you believe what you posited earlier, which is like, yeah, sometimes they just go like that and throw a question and go, there's 20 years of your life. Just deal with that.
So I wanted to throw in a couple more things.
Yeah.
So also the Blue
let
Velvet.
me just say, I'm sorry to interrupt. In about 10 minutes, I'm gonna have to go. But go ahead.
No 4-hour podcast or whatever. I mean, come on.
We've done it. Joel.
We're actually, I think
knows.
we're about at the 4 hours. Well, no, 3 hours, I guess.
Yeah, Joel knows. But I'm definitely going. I'm definitely going to tune in when you guys do one. But anyway, go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say with the Blue Velvet. Yeah, no, I love that meta aspect to it. That it's like, it feels like it's like a weird spiritual sequel to Blue Velvet, and that you need that resonance in a way to really feel something when like Cooper and Diane kind of get together in 17 and 18. And actually, so it's funny, well, we can do this off the mic, but I wanted to get you guys' emails because I was going to send you some stuff just that I'd done or previously on like Young or on Twin Peaks that kind of related to what we're talking about. But I got to throw this into the mix too, where the beginning of the next video I'm going to do, which I kind of previewed for 4 years ago, there's a lot of like intercutting of Blue Velvet and The Return, because I feel like that is like, in a way, The Return feeds off of not just Twin Peaks, but Lynch's whole filmography. So I do like that idea of like, if whoever's dreaming this is, they're into Lynch if they're not Lynch himself. That's within the story universe.
I'm so glad that you said that, because it's easy for you to go, listen, that's a bridge too far. Right? It's easy for people just to go like, look, just because the guy happens to like shooting a car being at night with a jerky cam doesn't mean that the dreamer's a David Lynch fan. And I'm going like, really? We're going to evoke the chevron pattern and we're not going to go like, couldn't it be possible that the dreamer, like, listen, in my head, it's possible for Mark Frost, thinking about the way that Carl Jung describes this personal drama, which would, at that time when he's describing it, be something that you might see yourself being on stage with other actors or people from the media or people from your life, whatever, right? And this drama plays out in your head, and the faces of an actor that might be in your brain represents an archetype, whatever. That's what he's suggesting is happening. So now it's updated, and I wouldn't put it past Mark Frost to go, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the dreamer is actually a David Lynch fan? I wouldn't put it past Mark Frost to put that. Like if this is the personal unconscious, there's no way. I would not put that past Mark Frost. And I think when we look at the reflections of like Blue Velvet particularly, it does give me a sense we're only supposed to be cheering that the two of them are finally united because of their involvement in Blue Velvet. Otherwise, why are we cheering? There was never an implication that Cooper and Diane had a romance. So why would we be so blown away by the idea that they're going to kiss and embrace? You know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't be blown away. If anything, we would be sort of weirded out by the information. Like, oh, I didn't recognize
Which some people were, to be fair. I wasn't.
Yeah, and instead it's played for this celebratory thing. Oh, it's finally occurred. What's occurred? Well, Laura Dern and Kyle MacLachlan are back on screen together. It's like that's what we're literally being asked to consume it that way. Like those two actors, there they are in the show, and it is completely meta. I don't believe that the show is just meta for the sake of meta. Right? Like there are those in our community who make analysis that believe it's just like this meta like pile where you just stick meta references into it. I think the show has a very clear narrative, right? Like the Twin Peaks narrative that's happening that we see, that's the narrative we're supposed to understand. And then there's things behind that narrative. And that's, sort of what my stuff is about. But clearly that's one of those places where it's like meta is the narrative here. That's what it means. I think you're right. So you're doing a video right now on that?
No, but the opening of the next kind of part of my long form Twin Peaks series begins with a kind of a narrationless montage, which is very centered around rhymes between Blue Velvet and The Return. And ultimately, just to throw one more wrench in there before we all go our separate ways, I think this is something that I've sort of thought around in the past, but I feel like I'm thinking about it more directly now that we're talking about this, which is I'm fascinated by the extent to which there's this portion of Lynch's career where he's collaborating with Mary Sweeney, who is his editor and his partner, very briefly his wife. There's some, look into the biographies for that. There's some weird legal thing where it was like, okay, if we're ever going to break up, we got to get married first so that, because they had a kid together long before that. Anyways, point being, she's his third wife. She's his editor. She's his producer. She writes one of his films. And that period to me, that's my favorite Lynch period, to put my cards on the table. And it occurs to me that the sort of 2 feature-length works before he starts collaborating with her is Blue Velvet, and 2 feature-length works after he stops collaborating with her is The Return. And so there's this weird symmetry there, because I feel like there's like an emotional kind of rawness and formal not complexity exactly, but like I don't know. To me, there's just like a crystalline kind of quality to what I would call the Lynch Sweeney years. and Blue Velvet precedes that, and The Return follows that, and I think yearns for it in a way. I'm not saying Lynch sat at his computer was like, man, I wish I'd stuck with my ex-wife, but like, there's something that's like calling back to Firewalk with me, which is from that period, and hungering for something that he was expressing at that time, which I think isn't really at the forefront of his mind in The Return, but which he knows is in some way the heart of Twin Peaks. So looking at those two kind of like bookends, it's just interesting to me that they're kind of looking forward to something and looking back towards something. And so anyways, that's another part of that kind of rhyming that I see there. But anyways,
I do think that the stuff that's made though during that time.
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm sorry. I just got pulled over by the police, and therefore I have to put up my stop sign hand. But I do look forward to you and Joel's conversation in the future, whether I'm a part of it or just a listener. Because
let me say this: what is you guys' email address? Because I'll send you at this point it's now 4 links, and send me whatever you want to return.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna
don't make this just a one-way street, but
no. As soon as I hang up, I'm gonna send you the 2 of our emails.
Okay.
I'll do that
and
myself.
I'll send you a few of those.
Yeah, cool.
Little God seeds.
But if I don't attend to, I don't know if I'm in somebody else's dream or not.
You're going to be locked into this room for the night if you don't leave.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get closer to the real world.
You have to jump consciousness.
Yeah, I think I need to, or else something's going to impose itself.
You better reach individuation soon.
I think I need to come up with something quick. But let me just say a formal and hearty thank you to you both. Joel, when you said you could make it, I was super psyched. And of course, you know why. And Tommy, I appreciate you, of course. And then coming back. And please send my best to Heather, because that was really cool to see her and get to interact. And look forward to doing that again.
Invite, man, because that was real special to me, dude.
Yeah, good. But let me try to get my way out of this ticket, and I'm going to work my way out of this ticket, and then I'm going to shoot you that email, Joel. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. This will happen again. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Okay. Bye. All right. Pray for me. All right. Good night, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks again.